Easy, Commissioner Lloyd, right off the bat. Good morning and welcome to our Board of County Commissioners regular commission meeting. I call this meeting to order. We do have a quorum present. All commissioners are here in chambers with us today. Would like to thank Commissioner Lloyd for chairing while I was absent in our last meeting. So thank you for that. And if you would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and afterward remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Commissioners, we have an agenda. What is your pleasure on that agenda?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion regarding the agenda? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say no. Thank you. We have minutes from the July 5th meeting of 2022. What is your pleasure, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I will make the motion to approve the minutes of July 5th.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I will abstain since I was absent. Acceptance of the bills. We have EALs, rebates, monthly reports, all there for our approval pleasure. What would you like to do, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the county vouchers and warrants, the abates and rebates, and the monthly reports as presented.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion regarding the bills? Then all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Thank you. We're on to some planning and zoning, a number of goodies today with public hearings attached. So this should be a good time. Present away.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. We'll get right into it. We've got 6 hearings today, and our first one is a conditional use permit for an accessory structure exceeding 100% of the gross floor area of a residence for a property that is owned by Crystal and Eddie Kleinlein Jr. It's located up on 801 Mountain Springs over north of Rock Springs. The zoning of the current parcel is R2. What Mr. Kleinlein is proposing to do is add an additional shop awning to his existing structure, his existing shop that's out there. Due to this being larger than his primary residence, his residence is only 1,830 square feet. Because this shop awning is being attached to the existing shop, it's going to increase that size, even though it's going to be open on 3 sides and it's going to exceed his residence. So per Sweetwater County zoning regulations, he needs to apply for a conditional use permit, which is why we are here today. Here you can see highlighted in orange the attached awning that's being proposed that's causing the additional 720 square feet to put this into a conditional use permit. This has been posted and adjacent neighbors have been notified. And I'll put a question back to you, Chairman Smith. Have you guys all read through the packet? Are you okay if I just do a general of the review criteria so I'm not wasting time today? And if anything has been striked out,
Commissioners,
you
is
guys
it
can
okay?
stop me.
Is it okay if we hit the highlights?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. biggest thing here, nothing is going to be adversely affecting any adjacent property owners. It's not going to be increasing any traffic flow in the area. Everything's well within site setbacks on the property site. It's just more making sure everybody's aware. And we've put this out to not only the adjacent neighbors, but also agencies in the area. And we have not gotten any negative comments back or concerns with this one. When we met with the Planning and Zoning Commission last week, the staff recommended approval to the Planning and Zoning, and the Planning and Zoning Commission also voted 5-0 in order to recommend approval based upon our recommendations. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions at all? Then we will open this for a public hearing. This is a public hearing on recommendation 22-07-ZO-01. Approval for a conditional use permit for a structure accessory. We will open it for a public hearing. If you have any comments, come up to the microphone or make your comments online. I guess if you're sitting in the audience, you could email. You could do that if you were gun shy or something, didn't want to get up to the mic. Any comments regarding this? Seeing no comments for this resolution, we'll close the public hearing. And commissioners, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion to approve the conditional use.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for resolution 20-07-ZO-01. Any discussion regarding this resolution? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Thank you. On we go.
Our next public hearing today is the applicant is LR Communications, and what they are doing is proposing a wireless internet site that is just south of Green River, located on the hill just south of town. The property that this wireless internet site is to be located on is actually owned by Green River Livestock Company. With it being zoned agricultural and also being located within the growth management area, it needs to be presented to you guys today for a conditional use permit again, and not just a regular old construction permit. As you can see, the proposed wireless site is, I'd say, about 1,000 feet, 600 feet south of the city limit boundaries of Green River. LR is proposing this wireless internet site to be a 60-foot tower to help with the expansion of their network. They have acquired the necessary leases with the Green River Livestock Company in order to operate this on their property. It will be very, very similar to the existing man face site that is located west of town that was approved, I'd say, about a year and a half ago. This site will run completely off of solar panels. There will be no need for electricity or any other utilities in the area. And it's proposed to cover roughly 50 by 20 square feet of ground. And as you see on the right-hand side, this is a picture of what the existing man face structure looks like. Again, it's going to be extremely similar. The solar panel that will be next to the building and the 60-foot tower is only going to be 50 by 24 feet roughly. And they have also provided a nice 3D view of the large hill that is located south of town that this is going to be located on. We have public noticed everything. We've put out comments to adjacent landowners, and we did receive several comments back on this. Most were just questioning to where it's located and everything, because we put the public notice and the posting out down on Hitching Post. so it can actually be seen instead of on top of this tower, that it's a little bit out of the way for everybody. So that did draw in some questions and just more what's going on, what is this going to be? But everybody seemed to be good with the answers that were provided, seeing that it was going to be a wireless internet site. It's not a cell phone tower. We did have one comment that was turned in late. Well, I guess right before the staff report went out. It came from Freddie Matty, who is a radiologist up at the Memorial Hospital. He did have some concerns with it possibly affecting the market value of his home, and also concerns with RF emissions. When we get to the public comment portion of this, I'm going to let LR Communications speak to that, since they're more professionals in that field than I am. And just a quick note on the review criteria that we go through. This is again located in a very remote location. We don't see any adverse effects on adjacent properties. They have all the existing structure that they need out there, as it's being a solar powered facility. And also I do want to bring to everybody's attention that because it will be an unmanned facility, we cannot regulate access to and from the site. It's an unmanned facility. So per state statute, they're okay with that. They've got to go through all their own things to get the access they need for that. So we cannot regulate any of that. And the big thing for us is, based on talks with LR Communications, the request, staff does not foresee that the request will adversely affect the public health, safety, or welfare. Electromagnetic forces and RF emissions are regulated by the FCC. We did receive 2 comments back from agencies, and they have no problems with the proposed project. And you guys have had the chance to read Mr. Matty's comments that were turned in to the office. And for the planning and zoning hearing, staff recommended approval. And at the July 13th, 2022, the P&Z Commission voted 5-0 to recommend approval based on staff recommendations as well. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions regarding this resolution?
Mr. Chairman, yes.
Yes.
What is the access though? Is there a 2-track road or?
There's 2-track roads up there. There's also a Forest Service road that is near the parcel.
Other questions? Then the resolution 22-07-ZO-02 requires a public hearing. So I'll open this for a public hearing. If you have a comment, come to the podium or discuss with us online. And when you come up, state your name and who you are representing in this matter.
All right, my name is Lance Slaughter. I represent LR Communications. And I was just going to address the one comment that had been received on this, which was concerns about electromagnetic radiation from the site. And so, you know, as was pointed out, the FCC regulates that. Any of the equipment we're using on the site is been approved to be safe for human exposure. The other thing that the site's located probably 1,000 feet when you consider the geographic or the elevation difference, as well as the lateral difference from any residential structure. And I guess the last part I would add to that is, if you have a cell phone and you've used a cell phone, spent a 10-minute phone call, you've probably experienced more exposure than you'd get over 10 years from the site we're building here. Certainly evidenced by the solar powering it instead of, large AC conductors and things like that.
Thank you. Questions for Lance? All right, thank you. Any other comments? Any other comments? And we'll close the public hearing. And what is your pleasure on resolution 22-07-ZO-02, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would move to accept recommendation 22 dash, my eyes aren't working now, 07 ZO-82 for approval of a conditional use permit for a telecommunication tower as presented.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Thank you. Moving right along.
All right, our next two public hearings actually are going to kind of work a little bit together, but the variance needs to come before the final plat. So this is, I'll get the big explanation out of the way. That way next hearing will hopefully go a little bit quicker. The property that is located out again on Mountain Springs Road is owned by Smith & Smith Rentals Rock Springs LLC. We've been working with Brian Smith and William H. Smith on this property. They are proposing to turn a roughly 3.5 acre parcel into 2 residential subdivisions, also being a mixed residential area at the end of Mountain Springs Road. Lot number 1 is proposed to be 0.5 acres and proposed lot 2 is to be 2.82 acres. Both lots will be accessible directly off of Mountain Springs Road. Brian is requesting a variance for the minimum lot frontage width and minimum lot to depth ratio for both lots 1 and 2. This is being requested due to the unique shape of the property and the location of the parcels that are along the curve of the circular drive, which limits the ability to lay out the lots according to county requirements for frontage access, and also due to the unique shape of the property boundary and locations of the parcels limits the layout of the lot width to depth ratio as well. I've also provided hard copies of this final plat, just a little bit easier to read than what we have here on the screen. As you can see, it's a pretty irregular shaped parcel. Most subdivisions that are of larger scale and based off of Sweetwater County subdivision regulations. The reason why there's a lot depth to width ratio is to make sure we can get houses and accessory structures built on these with 0 problems. But there is also reasons for unique circumstances for the variances that are requested here today. Just the general shape of the property is what's creating a unique situation. Not only is it shaped uniquely, but it's located on a cul-de-sac. As everybody knows, there's only so much distance that goes around on a circle, and it's even less. The engineering company has done their best to lay out these parcels to which both properties will be buildable lots according to Sweetwater County subdivision regulations. They have given a little bit more frontage to the proposed lot 1, the southern lot, just due to where it's located and just being a smaller parcel there as well. Also, it has a water line easement that runs on the property, being of 20 feet width. They gave a little bit more frontage, which helps when you add setbacks and everything in, keeps the property buildable when you're looking at our regulations. Property was posted and all adjacent owners were notified. Just to go over quick subdivision regulations for R2 mixed residential, the minimum lot width at the front of the property is 75 feet. And the minimum lot depth to width ratio is 2.5 to 1. Mathematically, these are not going to be possible with this property. Without beating a dead horse. The parcel is being split up into 2 lotted subdivisions. 2 lots on this 1 subdivision. The proposed lot 1 will only be about 25 feet less than the 75-foot requirement, and proposed lot 2 is only about 12 feet less. Again, this helps with keeping both lots buildable per our requirements, and also helps to make lots more desirable for those that choose to purchase these lots in the future. We do not see, staff does not see any other solutions than what has been provided. We think that it's been laid out rather well, and that we don't see any proposed conflicts or that it would be injurious to any neighborhood or other people in the area that would be detrimental. We did put this out for public and agency comment. Again, we got comments back from 2 agencies, and there are no issues with that. Staff recommended approval to the P&Z Commission, and at last Wednesday's meeting, the P&Z Commission voted 4-1 in approval based on staff recommendations for this variance of the Margie Smith subdivision. That's all I have for this one, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And so our next item is the other lot on this.
Then the next public hearing is actually the final plat subdivision. This one is a variance. If the variance doesn't go through, then we can't have the final plat go through. That's why this one comes first, but we do need to have 2 separate public hearings for
Thank
it.
you. And may I ask what the concerns were in the 4-1 vote?
Concerns there was a property owner, Lane Owens. He owns the property to the south of where the subdivision is going. His concerns were more for buildability and just potential views being ruined with 2 potential homes being built in the area and just one. One thing that did get clarified a little bit more as he was voicing his concerns is there is a power that runs to the property. It actually comes off his property and runs, and there's a power pedestal right at the northeast kind of quarter of that southern lot. With the final plat and everything that we're going through, one of Gene Legursky's, the Public Works Director, his comments back at the very early stages of sketch plat with this was that those power lines and everything are actually located within the county right away. So those need to be relocated and put into the 15-foot easement that is on the frontage of both of these lots. That will not only help to keep things out of the county road right away, but will also have a dedicated utility easement for all utilities, not just the power that is located there. So that is something that if this final plat is approved, that will have to be done in order to keep up with all the improvements that will need to happen with this proposed subdivision.
Thank you. Other questions? Then we will open this for a public hearing. This would be for resolution 22-07-ZO-03, approval for a variance of lot frontage and width. Public hearing is now open. We'll take any comments there may be. Don't be shy.
Very shy. I'm not very good at public talking.
Well, we're happy to have you.
So I would just like to explain that
Can you introduce yourself first?
I am Eric Harris with WHS Engineering,
Thank you.
and I would like to clarify about the concern, actually, if that's okay. There is an easement, a water easement that goes across the front of that property. It is approximately 30 feet back at the depth of the property, which means that it is a little bit more than the frontage of the setback from the front of the lot to the building envelope, which does mean it is in the building envelope. This is still a half-acre lot. I mean, the minimum lot requirements are 7,500 square feet, which is significantly less. So we still have a wonderful lot here, and I would appreciate having places to build, if that makes sense. It's hard to find right now. I left, went to school, came back, and it was hard to find places to live here because of, I mean, I think there was 5 houses on Zillow in the county for a while there. And I'm excited about development, and I hope that clarifies any sort of concerns that we have about the housing envelope being diminished by this easement.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other comments? Nobody else being shy. Okay, then we will close this public hearing. And commissioners, what is your pleasure on this first resolution of 2207-ZO-03?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Thank you. The variance passes and we're on to the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing that I failed to mention in the last hearing,
Oh, wait, what? We already voted.
I apologize for that, is that White Mountain Water and Sewer will actually be providing water and sewer to these properties. They've been very helpful with this process. We are still working out just a few details to get the property completely cleaned up and met with all of our regulations. One of the things that we are still working on with the help of White Mountain Water and Sewer and Northern Title is there are 4 liens that are still on the property for water and sewer assessment values. This is still being worked out. I don't see any reason why these will not get cleaned up in the next week or so. We're just trying to keep things moving forward. Just a little bit of background there in talking with both White Mountain Water and Sewer and Northern Title. We've come up with 4 options to where these liens can be cleaned up. There's various sorts of paperwork that can be provided if these documents cannot be provided for whatever reason. The last and final option is to have White Mountain Water and Sewer sign as an adjoinder on the plat, saying that they have interest in there because there would be liens outstanding. For the record, in talks with White Mountain Water and Sewer, they don't have any outstanding liens on the property. It's just a matter of cleaning up records that are filed here at the courthouse, so that there's no problems when these lots get sold. We have all the intention to get this cleaned up, even with approval here today. There's no reason for these liens to not be taken care of. It's just a matter of getting the correct documents recorded and moving forward with that. A few other things that were needing to be addressed on the plat, but have since been addressed just between the P&Z meeting last week and this week was the utility easement just needed to be 5 feet larger per Sweetwater County regulations. It needed to be 15 feet instead of 10. That has been addressed. And just making the plat a little bit cleaner and legible, that we're putting everything out there for future buyers to know what is existing on the property. All those requirements have been met and approved. We have also asked that Brian Smith sign a letter stating that he has intentions of completing all required infrastructure on this property within 180 days of this final plat being signed. Excuse me. One of the options that we have as with subdivision regulations, if the construction cost to improve the subdivision is small enough, we can hold the plat for up to 180 days as long as all required infrastructure is installed. The only thing that needs to be done for this subdivision to be met up to Sweetwater County standards for subdivision regulations is on the proposed lot 1. Sewer needs to be stubbed out just a little bit further, so it's actually into the property, and the water service needs to be taken from the county road and brought in completely into the property as well. And then, as I spoke in the last hearing, the power needs to be relocated from inside the county road right away and put into that 15 easement that is on the frontage of all those lots. So those are the few things that need to be addressed and improvements that need to happen. And Brian Smith has agreed to do that within 180 days of this plat being signed and approved by everybody. Staff also requests that fees in lieu of be waived for this subdivision. One, you can see there's not really any room for open space or more county parks in this location. And if you talk to Gene Legursky on this, he is okay with the number of county parks that we have in the county right now that are being updated and maintained. So staff recommends approval for this final plat with the following conditions being met. Liens listed as items 37 through 40 on Schedule B need to be released as directed by Northern Title with the help of White Mountain Water and Sewer District, or joinder's signature block will need to be completed for the appropriate signature from White Mountain Water and Sewer District on the final plat. Land use needs to have a signed letter stating all required improvements will be completed within the 180 days of the last signature on the final plat. The final plat cannot be recorded until all required improvements are installed and approved by the county. And the request for the variance must also be approved by the Board of County Commissioners. Those are our requirements for approval with this. And we don't see any reason why any of these four requirements will not be met, some of which have been met just in the difference of last week versus this week. And at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting last week, it was also voted 4-1 for the recommendation for approval based upon all staff recommendations. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions? And we will open up resolution 22-07-ZO-04 for a public hearing. If you have comments concerning this resolution, now is the time. Any comments? And we'll close the public hearing. And I'll ask commissioners, what is your pleasure on this resolution?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Lloyd.
I'd like to make a motion to approve recommendation 22-07-ZO-04 Smith and Smith Rentals, Rock Springs LLC, final plat, Margie Smith subdivision as presented.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chairman, I can second that.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Any discussion regarding this resolution?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I would recommend that the conditions be read into the motion. So I'd amend the motion to include the conditions as presented and read them into the motion. 1, liens listed at items 37 through 40 on Schedule B need to be released as directed by Northern Title with the help of White Mountain Water and Sewer District, or joinder signature block will need to be completed for appropriate signature from White Mountain Water and Sewer District. 2, final plat cannot be recorded until all required improvements are installed and approved by the county. If final plat is not recorded within the 180 days, the final plat will become null and void. And 3, request for variance must be approved by Board of County Commissioners. That's my amended to be added to the motion.
Thank you. Do we need a second on that?
A second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second on the amendment. Any discussion regarding the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any further discussion on the initial motion regarding this resolution? All those in favor then say aye.
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 Any opposed? No? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Much appreciated. And back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the next one is Industrial Services. The applicant is Dan Stanton, and the location's at 590 Signal Drive, and the zoning is commercial. And here's a map to kind of show you the location. So there's your Signal Summit intersection, and it's a corner lot. And so what they're requesting here, I've been actually working with Mr. Stanton, and he is initially was requesting a 5-foot, actually a 15-foot encroachment into the rear setback, and then another 5 foot into the side setback. And my initial issues were that there was a lot of, as you can see on the aerial photography, there was a lot of space there to locate the structure. So it was not a good argument to get a variance when you have a lot of space to place the building. There's not any topography that makes constraints here to locate the building, 5 feet from the property line. So in speaking with Mr. Stanton and then looking at our zoning resolution, we came to a compromise. And what we stated is right now, commercial has a 20-foot setback in the rear. I felt that in looking at other counties and then looking at our county, that we could reduce that setback to 10 feet. That would require a language amendment, which is what I'm going to be proceeding with. So in speaking with Mr. Stanton, I stated that I would be good encroaching until we do that language amendment, encroaching 10 feet from the rear setback. I did state that we would need to maintain still a side setback at 10 feet. And Mr. Stanton was okay with both of those setbacks. So there's just a site plan and then the location. And basically this building is being located for storage. In the county, our setbacks are a little bit larger than the city. And that's due to the fact that we don't have building code. So there's a lot of building. So when in the cities, you can even go to a 0 in certain cities, not necessarily Rock Springs, but you go into bigger cities and they actually have 0 setback front lines. So that's why in the county, our setbacks are a little bit larger than the cities. There's some photography, show you the location, and it was properly posted. In going through the criteria, just with that 10-foot encroachment into the rear setback, we do not see any adverse effects on the adjacent properties, which is the biggest concern. And then the utilities had no concerns, which is another thing you have to look at, make sure you're not affecting, especially when you're encroaching into setbacks, that you're not adversely affecting utility companies. So staff supports the request with the following condition. The variance is for the building specified in the application and allows the placement of the building 10 feet from the side and rear property line. And we received a 5-0 vote on that, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
Thank you. Questions? No questions, then we will open up a public hearing for resolution 20-07-ZO-05. Any comments, questions regarding this resolution? Any comments? And we'll close the public hearing. And commissioners, what is your pleasure regarding this resolution?
Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion to approve the resolution.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second for resolution 20-07-ZO-05. Any discussion regarding this resolution?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think since we haven't hit the language yet for the planning and zoning regulations, it would be important to amend that motion and make sure it has the one condition listed in it, which reads, allows the placement of the building to be 10 feet in the rear and side property line setback. And I'll amend that. I'll amend the motion by making that motion.
We have a motion for an amendment. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion regarding the amendment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? No. Sorry, Commissioner Lloyd, didn't mean to cut you off.
Okay, I'm an aye. Just a little second later.
We'll let you catch up. And on our original motion for resolution 20-07-ZO-05, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Thank you. And we carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the next one is a notice of intent hearing. And you know, you're familiar with these. This is because we are doing a language amendment, and this is to our current subdivision regulations. Our subdivision regulations are a little outdated. And anytime the state legislator makes changes to the statutes, we also have to change our regulations to stay in compliance with those. So we are proposing some changes to the exemptions. I do want to clarify and state this for the record, because this is what happened the last time we changed the subdivision regulations, or no, actually it was the solar regulations, is this is due to the legislator making changes, not the county. So we have to do what the legislator tells us when it comes to the exemptions. So that's what we're here today. So this is to pull it in compliance with those. What you have before you is what's in blue is added changes. So due to the family exemptions, now you have to actually own property for 10 years before you can deed property off to your children, compared to being 5 years prior. And then also, when you do sell that off, let's say to a child, they then have to hold it for 5 years before they can sell it. And it used to be 1 year. Part of these changes were due to the county cannot regulate minimum lot size on family exemptions. When that came up, I did have concerns, and I think Commissioner Wendling, I was working with you a little bit, and Senator Anselmi on this issue. My concerns with not having minimum lot size comes when you come to well and septic systems, but it fell on deaf ears, and so we now cannot regulate minimum lot size. So I think that's part of the reason why it went from 10 to 5, this 10 and 5 rule. So when they did change this in 2019, we had a lot of upset people north of Rock Springs that were holding on to property, and they were waiting for this 5th year to hit. And then they came in and tried to do a family exemption. And because the legislature made some changes, then they were pretty upset. They were banking on the fact that they could, and that 5th year, subdivide that property. So that's what they put a kind of a clause in there, so that if you own property prior to 2019, you could actually fall under that 5 years. So that's what that 5-year inclusion in there, which was made in 2020. And then there were some additional changes, some more further clarifications on partitions. Partitions are different than divisions of land. Partitions relate to when you give interest in land rather than actually dividing it off. And really, that's it, Mr. Chairman. That's all that I have. Again, this is a notice of intent hearing. We will put this out for public comment for 45 days. If there's no public comment, then we'll come before you to certify these regulations. And again, this is one of those things where we have to make these changes because the legislature made those changes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Bingham? Then we will open this for a public hearing. This is a notice of intent, language amendments to the 2012 Sweetwater County Subdivision Regulations, Section 3.3.c. We will open that up for public hearing. Anybody with comments related to this matter? Now's your time.
Mr. Chairman, we could put our illustrious senator on the spot and ask him why they changed it. Sorry, we caught you off guard.
Any comments? We'll close the public hearing. And commissioners, what is your pleasure regarding this notice of intent?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the notice of intent language amendment to the 2012 Sweetwater County Subdivision Regulations, Section 3C as presented.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion regarding this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That was fun. We should do it again sometime.
You bet.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Megan.
Much appreciated. We are on to a couple minutes late, but our county residents' comments, concerns, compliments, whatever you like. Now is your chance to speak to the board publicly. Nothing doing. Okay. Then we'll move on to tab D, Memorial Hospital of Sweetwater County, SLIB projects. Tiffany Marshall and Irene Richardson. Tiffany, you look way more awake than you said you were going to be. Good. Up and Adam.
All right. Our presentation, or I have it. I emailed it yesterday, but can I put this up, Dragon? Everybody?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm Irene Richardson. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Memorial Hospital of Sweetwater County. And with me, I have Tiffany Marshall. She is our Director of the Foundation. I have Tammy Love. She is our Chief Financial Officer. Mary Fisher, who is Director of our laboratory, and also Jerry Johnston, who is our Project Manager and Maintenance Supervisor, and also our Board Treasurer, Mr. Ed Tardoni. And we are here to present our request for matching funds for SLIP grants. And I'm going to let Tiffany make this presentation. She's done an excellent job putting this together with help from the A-team back there. And so I'm going to go ahead and let her do this, and I'll run the projector. All right.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
All right, cool. Okay, so Irene covered why we were here, so we'll just jump into it. We're trying to make it short and sweet, but we have a lot of information. So we're trying to do all kinds of things here. So first, I want to start out with introducing kind of what our experience with SLIP grants and really what we're hoping to do. So just a little bit of background. When SLIP had grants back in 2020 through the CARES Act funding, we applied for and received 12 grants independently. That totaled a little over $5.5 million. And we have listed out everything we were able to purchase. In addition to that, we also worked with Christina, and we did 3 additional SLIP grants through county sponsorship that you all approved and that Christina submitted for us. And we were successful in that too, and receiving over $300,000 for our project. So we're no stranger to SLIB in the process, and we're hoping that we'll be able to continue that success on as we move forward. So with this next round of funding that they have available is through Chapter 40 Health and Human Services Capital Construction ARPA grants. Within that, they have 2 different funds available. The total is $85 million, and it's broken up into that broad eligibility funds of $63 million and that narrow eligibility fund of $22 million. We will be focusing on that broad eligibility fund under Section 2IA, which is qualifying health and human services infrastructure and capital construction investment that improves the healthcare facility. So with that, we want to talk about our first project, which I know you guys are no stranger to, and that's our lab renovation. We'll come back to what this looks like, or this picture, but this is basically the outline of what we would like to see for our lab expansion. And so first we want to talk about why it's important for this expansion and renovation. And so back when COVID-19 hit, OSHA, Joint Commission, and the CDC put out a bunch of recommendations for healthcare facilities. And Irene and team was really quick to address those and take immediate action. And the main thing that we did was restricted entrance into the hospital for anybody that was not seeking healthcare services. So no visitors, no guests, no unnecessary foot traffic. With the laboratory being in the hospital, we decided to relocate that to an exterior area, which is our lab. Our foundation lab is what we call it. I think we have like 10 different names. But so that's where they've been, because you can actually enter the lab without having to enter the hospital in that location. We also then included the swabbing station at the front of the entrance of the hospital so patients could drive through and get swabbed for their COVID-19. So this was pretty awesome, except for it displaced our foundation and legal staff, a very minor price to pay for addressing our community in the pandemic. So that's why it was so awesome, is because we were able to continue our lab services and meet the needs of our community while still following all of those guidelines that were recommended. So the advantages of having our foundation lab, our temporary lab, our second lab, whatever we want to call it, is that it provides immediate access to our community without entering the hospital. It minimizes the foot traffic. It's easy to find once you enter our hospital campus. And in relation to our permanent laboratory in the hospital, the waiting area is a lot bigger. So we're able to social distance our patients when they come in and need assistance. And then in addition, it also provided additional space to our permanent lab for all of our equipment that we received through SLIB and also purchased throughout the pandemic. But with advantages comes a couple barriers. And the barriers that we're currently facing is that having multiple locations has increased our staffing and our operational costs, because we've had to now staff 2 locations instead of just 1. We're paying in excess of $158,000 just in a couple staff salaries to be able to accommodate these, in addition to other operating expenses. Our patient registration area is not as private as we would like for it to be, and our restrooms do not accommodate bariatric wheelchairs. So when we have patients that have those wider wheelchairs that we need to get a urine sample from or need to use the restroom, we kind of struggle with that location area. Our plumbing is kind of insufficient for being a patient care area. It's great for being an office, but for patient care, we'd like for that to be a little bit better, along with our HVAC. Our specimen transportation is pretty unsafe during winter months, and I'll touch on that a little bit. And then as far as our patient care, a lot of our patients who require multiple testing, so they'll come in for a blood draw or a urine sample, then have additional tests like an MRI, ultrasound. They then have to walk out of the foundation, walk all the way in front of the hospital to the side through the ED just to trek back into the medical imaging area. So it's pretty inconvenient for our patients. So when we were looking at how to face these barriers, we put a chart together and we came up with 3 options. The first option is continue on as needed, or as we are now as needed. The benefits we've pretty much outlined already. It's great for staff. It minimizes foot traffic into the hospital. It's great for patients, not so great for staff. And then the disadvantages we just went through and talked about, so I won't bore you with those. Our option 2 would be to renovate the current temporary foundation lab and then also renovate the hospital permanent lab as well. The cost for that's going to be approximately $3 to $4 million. And what we would do with that renovation is we'd expand a little bit in the foundation area to provide for a bigger waiting area, a better registration area. We would upgrade and fix our plumbing. We'd have to upgrade and fix our HVAC. The disadvantage to that is we're still staffing 2 locations, so we still have additional operational costs in that. Sorry, I can't see very well.
Your specimen transport was the
Oh,
significant
thank
issue
you.
there? You're welcome.
Significant issue. So specimen transport. So when our patients come into the foundation lab and they provide their samples, we then have staff that will carry it to the permanent lab inside the hospital so we can process those tests. In the winter months, like not so much like now, but when it's raining, when it's snowing, when the sidewalks are slick, it really puts our staff in unnecessary danger having to transport these with the risk of slips and falls. In addition, with the risk of slip and fall, but with the change in temperature from going inside to outside to inside, it could potentially damage those testing specimens as well. So that's something that we would like to address. The plumbing, we would have to update that, but because nothing is ever easy, the pipes we need to get to are at the back end of the parking lot. So to get to the plumbing, we'd have to pull up the whole sidewalk and then most of the parking lot to get to the plumbing. So that causes a whole bunch of other barriers. Our HVAC, we would need to update to tie into the updated HVAC that we did in our patient care areas in the hospital recently. And then we would still have to do our test processing site, which is a whole other discussion on accommodating that equipment. So that brings us to option number 3, which is what we'd like to present today. Cost is a lot more. It's 8.7 million estimated, but it really will solve all of our barriers. So with this one, it still has the advantages of what we've already talked about, but all of our staff is back in one location. We'd be able to reconfigure and increase our space for all of our test processing equipment to account for it all. We'd reconfigure and build out our registration area to allow for private rooms or private spaces for our patients. It would include a drive up or drive through accessibility when we're collecting our high transmissible antigen testing like COVID-19 or other things like that. We're also looking at adding a second floor to build up some space, and that second floor would address our displaced staff. We could provide some additional storage for a lot of our PPE and our COVID response equipment that's currently in our hospital's basement hallway. And it also sets the hospital up for a little bit of extra space that we'll be able to include or increase our services and access to care here in the future. So doing this project, it meets the pandemic. It solves a lot of the issues we're facing now, but it also helps the hospital when we're ready to grow out here in a couple years. The disadvantages, obviously finding funding, $8.7 million is quite a chunk of change. And the time to execute the renovation, to do it right and get it done, we definitely want to not cut corners and make sure we're addressing all of our barriers. So with that, this is what our expected lab would look like. I actually showed this picture to somebody yesterday and they thought it was the main entrance of the hospital. And they're like, so how do you get to the lab? It was quite fun. It made me smile. So this is what the lab would look like. You have that drive up area right there. So it's really consistent with the rest of what the hospital looks like. We have zero escape in that corner. We want to minimize our water use a little bit. And I'm beyond greedy and I'm trying to stake claim to that area for us to dedicate a guardian angel garden for our staff to recognize and honor our staff. So that's what we're looking at. That's what it would look like. To give you a little more in depth, this is kind of the overview. So on the left in the green, in that bottom right-hand corner, you walk in, there's a little reception area, then there's a waiting area. If you continue to walk all the way just straight up that little hallway, that would put you into the hospital, or you could turn left where we have more patient testing areas in a waiting room. And that top left corner is where we'd be able to expand some space for our testing equipment. On the blue side, that is, we have some ideas and we've conceptualized what we would like that second floor to look like to account for those offices and storage area, but we haven't been able to put it on paper. So that's more of just a sample of what the size and the layout of that second floor would be. If you want to get really technical, this is a bigger look. So as you can see that that yellow outline, that would be where that addition and expansion starts, or where it's placed. It's perpendicular to our normal lab. So if you look at the dotted rectangle, I guess, that would be the overall size of our lab with this renovation and addition. So with that, the $1 million question is, how in the world do you get to $8.7 million? Because that is a lot. And so working with Plan One, who is our architectural partner, they've broken down all of the costs of executing that. We do go pretty conservative. But, you know, with today's supply chain and everything going on, we'll see. But we went pretty conservative, so we don't expect to go over that, but we do hope to go a little bit under that. So that's the breakdown. Do you guys have questions, or do you want me to go into the second project and then we can talk about them all?
Carry on.
All right, awesome. So our second project that we would like to present to you is our MOB renovation and expansion. So when we listed out the grant, the 2020 SLIB grants that we received, the medical office renovation was on the bottom and it had the little asterisk. And that's because we submitted an MOB renovation project to SLIB in 2020 and they approved it. We unfortunately had to rescind that because the timeline to secure the doors that we had in that project at the time was 18 weeks out. And because the guidelines and the timelines for that funding was so strict, we couldn't meet those guidelines. So we unfortunately had to rescind on that grant. So here we are, round two. So this, we'll get back to this, but our second project is our medical office building renovation. And everybody knows where that is and all the fun things about our MOB. All right, so just like the lab, when we had COVID-19, the recommendation was to limit foot traffic. So along with the hospital, we did with our medical office building, it was only patients with appointments, no guests, no visitors. In that first floor of our medical office building, we house 5, 6 different specialties are OB, pediatrics, neurology, internal medicine, pulmonology, and then when the University of Utah comes, our clinics are on the first floor as well. So the barriers that we face with our first floor of our medical office building is that we have a really pretty fireplace when you walk in. We love the fireplace. I talk about it all the time. But it's really a hindrance for a lot of ways. It takes up a big space that we could use to socially distance our patients. And it's also very hindering for when you walk in. So when you walk in the building, it's right there and you automatically want to walk in and turn right because that's the flow of the room. Well, turning right goes right into that first floor waiting area, even if you need the cancer center in the basement, dialysis, ortho, or any of the other services that are on the second or third floor. So that fireplace really hinders our patients' view and finding their appropriate clinic for their appointments and increases our foot traffic in our waiting area that we really would like to minimize. In addition, when you walk in, have you guys all been to the medical office building? So when you walk in, you get that blast of air. And so the reason that is because the vestibule between the exterior door and the interior door is so small, but we have to have a way to regulate the difference in temperature. So that's what that blast does. So even though it seems super annoying, it actually solves, or it's there for a purpose. And so we'd like to eliminate that because we don't want air blowing particles everywhere every time that door opens. And then again, the directional signage is pretty insufficient because we have our beautiful fireplace. So
That blast kept the flies out.
it does.
Good. Yeah.
It does. It makes it really cold in the winter though,
That's true.
because it's constantly the doors open and cold air is everywhere, but we don't have a fly problem.
That's good. Good.
No. Thank you. So just like the lab project, we looked at different ways to renovate in different ways to meet the needs of our issues and came up with 3 options, just talked about the barriers for option 1, which is leaving everything as is. The only advantage is if we're not renovating, we're not spending money, right? So no cost. The second option is executing the MOB project that we submitted to SLIB, which is very similar to what we're presenting. It would increase the waiting area by about 300 square feet. It would remove the fireplace, which would be the visual barriers. We would include a little help desk or informational desk to help our patients. We would be able to update our HVAC and we'd update the doors, and the HVAC and the updated doors would then address the issues of the blasts. The problem with that, other than the fireplace, which I promise someday I'll stop talking about, is securing the necessary equipment and the challenges that we face. So because we've already tried to do this project, those same doors that we looked at doing, which were like the roundabout doors, they're now 25 plus weeks out. So they continue to just keep getting pushed back and back. And then in talking with our clinic director and our internal staff, it doesn't really allow for those clinics on the first floor to really expand and grow. So it solves the problem for now, but it may not solve the problem for 2 years down the line when our clinics are bigger and we see more patients. Right now, our patient volume in just that first area in those clinics, on Monday, we average about 175 patients. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, about 200, and on Fridays, they're right around 100. So we've got a lot of bodies in that little space, just in that little space. All right, so option 3 is our MOB remodel and expansion, very similar to what we just talked about, but we're looking to actually increase it approximately 700 square feet, so patients have more room. And then for the most part, we're addressing everything else, the HVAC, the blasts, more space. And then we're looking at doing a different set of doors. So we're looking at doing the sliding open doors like we have in the ER and the main entrance in our foundation area. In addition, if we do these kind of doors and expand out a little bit, it will also indirectly address some parking issues that we have. So it really is going to solve multiple issues we have for our patients with one project. The only really disadvantage that we have, other than my favorite fireplace, is the specific door needing to order is about 25 weeks out now. However, the deadline to have this project completed is December 30th, 2026. So we do have time to get that done. And securing the equipment. So to give you a little outline, it's kind of hard to see. I should have used a different color, but can you see the yellow? So the yellow is what we're looking at renovating. So on this bottom part, we're expanding the vestibule and bringing it out. So it's more spacious, like our entrance almost, to allow for the proper airflow exchange and not blast air at you. The middle part is where we would remove the fireplace and we'd be able to include more seating there. And then we're also looking at expanding that little area in the top right corner to account for more seating as well. From the outside view, this, I think it's green. Is that green? Yep. So the green bottom, that would be where we're addressing some of our parking issues. The blue would be that expansion of the vestibule. The pink is where we would do the bulk of our renovation. That long salmon, what color? I don't know what color
I'm
that
not
is.
eating salmon if it looks like that.
Me either. Me either. All right, we all know what we're talking about here. Okay,
Yeah.
so this long part would be our fire lane, and then we'd add a little bit of more parking in that back just to account for a couple spaces that we've lost. And so the second $1 million question is, how do we get to our costs? Again, Plan 1 has broken that down in an estimate. Just like the lab, we're trying to be pretty conservative because I don't know about you, but I like to come under budget on things. So if I see 2.1, I'm aiming for like 1.7. So that's what we're aiming for, but we'll see. But that's the breakdown of how we get to our 2.1. So just to recap a little bit, oh, you're good. To recap a little bit, our first priority obviously is the lab renovation and expansion. I think it would be a tremendous benefit to our community. It would be able to meet all of the needs that we had during the pandemic while somewhat planning for any future pandemics that I hope we never have. If we apply to the SLIB board, it would, and they approved it, it would be about 4.35 million that they would get, and then we would have to provide the matching funds for that. Our second priority, our medical office building renovation, the total is 2.1 million, so we'd have to provide about $1 million of our matching. As it sits now, we're not sure when SLIB will review, approve, deny, and discuss these grants. The due date for them is August 15th. They're going through a pretty rigorous vetting program process this time. So I'm anticipating to hear something for a meeting in late September or maybe October. The guidelines do outline that all funds have to be obligated by December of 2024 and projects have to be completed by December of 2026. So with that, I'm sure you have questions, and what can we answer?
Backwards slide.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, go back one more.
Mr. Chairman.
One more. I just want to see that last page with the dollar.
We got it. You stay right there, Irene, but it'll come back up there. While we're doing that, thank you, Tiffany. Nice job, Irene.
You bet.
Excellent work.
Do you want this one or the next?
The next one.
You
Sorry.
got it. Nope, you're good. Other way. There we go.
That's what I needed. Thank you.
Yes,
So the timing, you feel good about both, whether it's the lab or the
yes.
MOB? Okay.
Yep.
And then are there funds from the hospital, or are you asking the county for the entirety of both of those to match funds?
To be honest, we would like to ask for as
Lie to
much
me,
as you'd
Tiffany.
like to give us, and then we will work on being able to provide the rest of it through the hospital and or foundation. I
Okay.
can't speak for the foundation board, but I know that they're very supportive in what we want to do. We have talked about providing some matching for this as well if we need.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions? Mr. Shankfield?
Yeah, Tiffany, you
Yep.
said that you emailed this presentation.
We did. Late. I'm sorry. It's
You
totally
didn't
my fault.
receive it. I just wanted to
I'll
look at.
re-email it to you. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to look at the numbers
absolutely.
because they're too small for me to actually see. up
They
there,
are
so-
very small on this. I'm sorry.
so you're good. Thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner. Lloyd.
Yeah, a couple. On the second project, I'll go backwards. My question is, some of this, it all makes sense, but my question is, in a tough economic time, is this more of a want than a need? Is it going to delay the essential ability to provide services by not going into option or 2 or 3 and remaining at 1 is my question.
I don't think that we are in absolute dire need, but I think when we're looking at ways to combat the pandemic and keep our patients seeking services safe, it's definitely a necessity.
Okay.
And so we've also talked, I'm so sorry. So we've also talked, I've talked to Gene Station, Dr. Station about both of these projects. And she was like 10 times more, you need to fix this MOB issue before she even talked about our lab issue. So I think it's from different areas in the community. I think it's definitely something that needs to be addressed.
Other questions? Oh, go ahead.
Just really quick to follow up. You know, SLIB offered these funds. And so now we think is an opportune time to be able to receive at least half the funding for the prior funds, the 5.5 million. It was 100% paid for by SLIB. This time it's a 1-for-1 match. And so the funds are available. We think it's not a good opportunity. We'd be grateful for any funds that the county could offer. And of course, like we said, we would supplement with hospital capital funds and also foundation if they would consider that. So we feel like it's an opportunity now, and again, meeting the needs of the patients and also that the funding is available.
Okay. And then the second thing is just more of a comment, and that's just, I think if we were to do any kind of a match, I don't know if we could use our ARPA funds, because there is rules against using ARPA funds for similar projects. We would have to more bring that out of our general funds, if I'm not mistaken.
You are correct. You can't use ARPA funds to match ARPA funds.
Yes, correct.
Other questions? Then would we like to take action on this today? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Apologize.
Yeah, I believe Commissioner Lloyd, when you reference the ARPA, you're exactly right. What would have to happen is probably we would earmark money that would probably come out of our reserves. And then we would ask that our grant manager and writer, as well as the accountant, get together and take a look at the lost revenue or lost wages account and see if it can be used. And then as that money shows itself in the carryover, then it could be moved back into the reserves. So it's a moving game. The second thing, though, is I think you have to be a little bit of a visionary with this project. To sit here and say it's not needed is not totally accurate. If you take a look at what's coming down the pike and watch what's happening with across the world, contagious infective antigens are showing up, worse numbers, even more critical than before when COVID started. And right now, the best things besides that's outside of whatever your beliefs are, but the best things for combating it are social distancing, using antibiotics, washing often, and those types of things, and as well as in confined spaces, heating elements and the control of those antigens moving around. So I'm a little reluctant to say there's not much emphasis on this. I think there needs to be an exact emphasis in looking to the future, because you're probably going to end up having to have it done. And we truly think things may get cheaper in 2 years. But right now, having experienced the foundation lab, I'll call it that, quite often, it's not a good setup, period. You can find all the reasons in the world. It's not a good setup. Second of all, you take a look at the medical office building when you walk in there, which I do very, very often, because I believe in our hospital and I believe what it has to offer. The hospital is one of my top 3, if not the top venue for me as a commissioner. And I think what's important is what's the return on investment. If we don't have things operating correctly and right as we move forward into what we very well know medically what's ahead of us, our return on investment will not occur. People just will find someplace else to go. And we see that already. We see Aspen offering testing, offering several things that we do. We're beginning to see other community health doing the same thing. We're seeing urgent clinics coming in doing it. They're competing. And the reason is we're not on the cutting edge, and people see the things, how we're operating. It's just makeshift. It's kind of like in education. If we hire too many teachers, there's going to be a few teachers and kids teaching and learning out of closets because we haven't taken care of our facilities. We have one hospital. That's the responsibility of this commission to listen carefully, which we have, to people that run it, and hopefully get ahead of things so we can keep our people in this community using these facilities that are so valuable to everybody. So there's a need, and it's a bigger need than we're admitting. And that's only because of what's driving it for the future. What is our return on investment? Ms. Marshall, you had commented that you gave some numbers of when that office is Monday through Friday. I think it's important that when we talk about return on investments, especially in our facilities, it's are we drawing more patients to our facilities? Because that's our return. What's the increase? We take a look at the building that has our practices in them up there by the college. I want to Hilltop. Thank you. Our Hilltop building, new one. My God, it's crazy with people. That's a return on investment. I remember when we got that building, it wasn't under the most pleasant circumstances, but I'll tell you what, we made it work.
Mhm.
And it was a good investment, and it's getting some good return. We need to forget about how things were done 2 years ago, because they're not appropriate and they're not right for the people that need to use it, not only for today, as well as in the future with what's on the horizon. That medical office building in that area, yes, it was a great plan. It was perfect for the time when we built it. And my gosh, those commissioners and hospital executives that brought that forward paid through, I believe, special purpose tax. And that they need to be commended, but it's time it's watched and ready for today's needs and future needs. Same thing with our lab, our hospital. I don't think we'll ever be able to go back operating the way it was. Opening the front doors and everybody coming in and visiting and eating and doing everything. Those things have all changed. And they're going to continue to change because of the health of the people that are using it. And we have that responsibility to make sure that building can effectively and efficiently serve the population that comes into it. So I don't know what your commissioners are thinking, but I did want to answer those questions and just remind us that this is about our community. It's not about money. It's about what's doing right for the people that live in this community. And some people will say the money's not there. It's there. It's there. We didn't have to go into our reserves this year. If I'd have been on top of things, we wouldn't have to even spend 500 grand. But we did. That's okay. But we were intentionally thinking about going into several $1 million down to 25. We did not have to. And we also know that because of our Miss Marshall and the work she did, working through ARPA cares and that we were able to position ourselves to make things happen. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wendling. Other comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Shanefield.
I wanted to start off with a few comments from an economic development standpoint. Excuse me. And then I also have a few questions on financials. So I want to make a point to point out that we pulled this or did not pass it on the specific purpose tax ballot because there are other opportunities to use federal funds for this. And so I think that that was a very responsible thing to do from the hospital standpoint in looking at the fact that there are other opportunities right now, and that it is a great opportunity to look and utilize federal dollars within our community and to potentially match those. I also want to speak from an economic development standpoint in that when we're looking at recruiting new businesses, expanding the businesses we have here, some of the top things that people look at, number one is healthcare. Number two is having an airport. Number three is our community college. And I want to say that we have the top three of those across the entire state. And we need to look at reinvesting in that for continued growth and development. Because when I look at where I want to retire, where I want to move, if there was, if we had to move, those are the things that I would be looking at. And we need to ensure that those are the very top throughout our community. I also think that the services that have been expanded through the University of Utah, our dialysis center, our cancer center, all of that, that makes us a premier community to live in the state of Wyoming. Most rural communities don't have what we have. And there is a healthcare crisis across the state. We're seeing it in OB especially, that we have what a lot of communities don't have, and we're very blessed to have that. So I agree, Commissioner Wendling, that we do need to look at where we can develop, where we can expand while still utilizing these federal dollars and not putting the burden on our taxpayers where we can. My question is, so the last financial report from the hospital showed like a $5 million loss. And so that concerns me that we're looking at, potentially putting up with additional costs. Is this going to create additional debt for the hospital in general? And then how does the foundation plan on, potentially coming up with additional funds if we don't fund the entire match amount?
Okay, and thank you, Commissioner Schoenfeld, for those comments. We do try to do the best we can to provide excellent healthcare services for the community. So as far as our financials, you're correct. Those are the operating financials, and we experienced a lot of expense due to the staff shortages. So during the pandemic, traveling agencies for nurses, lab, respiratory therapists were luring away staff by paying them, 2 or 3, 4 times sometimes what their average wage was. And so they took advantage of that. We, on the other hand, had to pay for that to supplement staff. So those are the operational expenditures that we don't anticipate having in the future, because we're doing some, we talked to the board about approving some wage adjustments so that we could recruit and retain our own staff so that we could eliminate that expense. So we know that our goal as a community hospital is to have services that meet the needs of the community, and also to reinvest back into the facility, into our staff, into the community. And so we would have we're looking for cash flow from operations. And so as long as we can have some positive cash flow and we can have some money in our reserves so that we can, maybe do some sort of match or some funding, include more capital and invest more capital into the facility. That's what we're trying to do. So, we would have some funds available if necessary that we could also contribute to this as a match from our reserves. And so, yes, our plan is not to have that again and not have another multi-million-dollar loss in the future. So I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Yeah. So as far as the foundation goes, we have about 1.7 million in cash in our bank right now. We have a couple bigger projects that we're looking at. This is one that we're looking to support where needed. We also have another piece of equipment that we're potentially looking at purchasing for the hospital to bring a robotics program to our hospital. So we're kind of in flux, waiting to see how the dominoes lay to see where we can allocate some of our funds. In addition, we do anticipate having our gala next year, if we need to dedicate that to 1 or 2 different funding sources. All of our fundraising efforts, we bring in, well, COVID has kind of messed us up a little bit, but we average anywhere from about $400,000 to $800,000 to $900,000 a year in fundraising efforts. So The way that this funding is laid out and with the application process, I wanted to point that out in case we had that question, is that for our match requirements, we have to provide a 50-50 match. There are set criteria to decrease that match, but we don't qualify for those, which is kind of a bummer, but it really speaks volumes for our community that we're not ranking in those areas. But what we have to do upon approval of the grant award, if we get that, is no later than 6 months, we have to show that we have 33% of the match, no later than 1 year, 66% of the match. And we have to show that we have 100% of the match ready to go by, excuse me, December of 2023. So even if the foundation needs to do some fundraising to get some money to support that and fill in any gaps, we do have about a year or two to do that, to raise additional funds if and when needed.
Thanks, Commissioner Shanefield. Other questions or comments?
I just want to also point out, and I don't know the number of jobs that this would create just through the construction process, but I would expect that this would create some jobs throughout our community. I know you guys have internal maintenance and building, but I'm sure you'll be bringing lots of contractors
yes.
to help with this. So
Yes.
that's all. Thank you.
And then I wanted to just address, I think, Chairman, you asked if we felt these projects could be done. So I don't have the MOB information in front of me, but the timeline's a lot shorter. Our timeline or our estimated timeline would be, because we don't know when the grant will be approved, if approved through SLIB. Our timeline currently is that we would have our design finalized by July of 2023. Our bids would go out in September, October of 2023. We would start construction January of 24. To be completed by December of 2025. So we do have a timeline built in that.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Just one statement. I just want to clarify that I do, and I'm a big believer in the support of our hospital, and I do believe finding ways to process it and grow it is important. But one of my concerns in this situation is if we did both projects, the total match money from us, if we did all the match money, would be over $5 million. We were rewarded 8.2 in ARPA. And I think if we're going to give that much money out to one entity, I think we should also open up the process to other entities, because there were other entities that asked to be on the 6 penny that had valuable projects. And I think we should hear them all. And then if we have that extra money, vet it out and make a decision as a commission where that money should go. Because if we don't, this one match could take us, because we've already spent, I don't know, a little over $1 million in ARPA funding. A little over 2. Sorry, I got a 2.5. Thank you. I'm getting hand signals from our grant writer. So if you were to add those two, that would almost wipe out the ARPA money. And if that's where we as a commission feel is the best place to put the money, then we should move forward. But I think we should have a process to vet it out and have those discussions and look at all the projects that could benefit from that ARPA money before we move forward. So I'm not saying I don't see the hospital as the most valuable project, but I think there are other projects that we should hear on too, and we saw that because we did have to reduce quite a few projects on the 6 penny. And maybe that's a place we can start to look at and vet things out. So that's just my thought process.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I applaud you for trying to get the SLIB grant in, but I have to point out to Commissioner Boyd that their application is due August 15th.
So our application's due August 15th. Our goal is to have it submitted by August 5th to give us a full working week to answer any questions or fill any gaps that the SLIB office comes back for. Within our application, we do need to provide source of funding. So not saying we need money in the bank by any means, but just a letter saying, we're committing to supporting this with X amount. So unfortunately, we have a relatively short deadline on that. That's also our experience with SLIB. They tend to like to give us very short deadlines.
True.
Got to make it hard.
Right? But we're ready, kind of.
And my concern, to answer Commissioner Lloyd's question or concern about opening to others, is are many of those others that we did not put on the specific purpose tax ballot eligible for funding like this, and are they ready by August 15th to apply to, this is an opportunity for us to double our money, and so that's, in my mind, is a big factor in if we did wait and do a process and allowed others to, submit their propositions as well, I think that we may miss out on any money. And while there may be others that are equally as worthy, important, valuable in our community, it would be very difficult, I think, for anybody else to meet those deadlines to apply for this grant funding. So that would be my concern with waiting and opening this up to a larger, longer process. But I appreciate the thought, absolutely. Any other comments? Then what's your pleasure, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman. I just want to throw out there that I would like a little bit more time to figure out where we're going to pull the money from. But I also don't feel like that puts us on hold for saying that we're going to support this. And so I'd like to have some discussions with Bonnie and looking at what we've got in reserves and where we would like to look at that. And so I don't feel comfortable making a decision about that today. I do feel comfortable about making a decision on how much we want to support, where we want to support the hospital. So that's where I'm at.
Okay. Okay. Commissioner Wendling.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I'll make a motion
thank you.
that we mark $3 million out of reserves for Sweetwater Memorial Hospital as they apply for SLID money on their 2 projects.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will second that with the amendment that we put together a letter for Mr. Chairman to sign in support, so they have that for their process.
That was my intent with my motion, so thank you.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second. Discussion regarding this motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Lloyd.
I just want to go on the record that I will be voting no because I do see the timeliness. I do see all that. I do believe we could have a little more time to vet out these large projects than a 20-minute discussion in a meeting that we didn't even really have the information prior to the meeting. So I do support the hospital, but I do think we should vet out other projects that could be valuably used with that amount of money. And at the end of the day, I may have been willing to go the whole 4.5 for the $5 million for the hospital, but without the opportunity to vet it out, I have a hard time voting yes. So.
Thank you. Other
Okay.
comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
as things move forward, Commissioner Smith could always come at a later date and add additional dollars.
That is true. Any other comments? Seeing none, then.
Roll call.
Okay, let's go with Commissioner Wendling.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith, yes. Commissioner Shanefield.
Yes.
Commissioner Toman.
I'll say yes, but I would like to review our financials and maybe it can be a different number.
Commissioner Lloyd.
I support what you're doing, but I'm voting no for the reasons stated.
Thank you. A qualified no. Thank you. So motion passes, and we'll continue to work, and you'll have your hands full trying to, match to get up to the project that you have. And from what I hear, it's going to be pretty darn competitive as well for this money. So you've done an excellent job today, and I hope that you can do the same with the SLIB. And if we can help out in any way, we'd be happy to do that to make this successful.
We appreciate it. Thank you, Chairman and Commission, and I will get the slideshow over to you guys today as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Smith, may I ask Tiffany? I did double check with our IT department and the file was too large, so she did send it yesterday.
I'll Dropbox it to you.
I was going to ask if I could use your
can have that
thumb
too.
drive and I'll
You
just
can do
copy
whatever
it
you
and
would like.
Send it right over to the commissioners.
No problem at all.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you for the
very
work.
Well, Sally, if it's over 20 megs, it won't come to us through you either.
It'll be on the drive though.
Oh, you can post it on the drive. Okay, thank you.
We're behind schedule, and so we are going to take a break for 10 minutes. Well, we'll come back at 10:15. So I apologize to our Colorado River and also the Little Snake River Conservation District, but we will certainly get back to you shortly. So recess, we'll be back at 10:15. That was an excellent meet and greet, but I call this meeting back to order. We will pause momentarily for Commissioner Toman. We're on to tab E. Update on the Governor's Colorado River Task Force meeting held in Bags. Aaron Reichel, I believe, is with us today.
Hey, good morning, Chairman.
Thank you.
Would you like me to wait?
Okay, we waited. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. We're going to try to distill an all-day meeting into 15 minutes, so it's going to be brief and hopefully a little time for some questions. I also got Ron Wild here from Pacific Corp. He's also on the Governor's Task Force. I see Senator Hicks is here, also on the task force, and several other folks who were at the Bags meeting, I see. And so hopefully we can give you a little update and answer a few questions. So summary, I'm going to touch these points. We had a poor water year in 2022. I don't think that's a surprise, although it might be just because some of the data that people have seen. There was a request by the Secretary of Interior for the states to have a plan by mid-August to reduce consumptive use by 15 to 30%. So a giant reduction. Talk a little bit about that. And then one of the key things that came out for me is the state engineer's office took us through a calculation to show that we're not immune from curtailment in Wyoming. You know, we often hear that Wyoming has more water. And so it might give the false impression that we may be immune from that, but depending on your interpretation of the law, and I'm not a lawyer, but just repeat, you know, kind of what I heard and what kind of makes sense, we aren't immune from curtailment. So first, the dry year. So here the magenta line is the 30-year average. The blue line is the 2022 snowpack. You can see the Colorado River Basin on the left, Green River on the right. And so maybe later in the year, you may have saw some data that showed that the Green River was, you know, 90+% of median. However, that can give a false impression because you see the blue line, the peak never, the snowpack never got close to the peak. And so we had a late spring, the snowpack stayed late. And so those high 90s percentage of snowpack numbers gave a false impression. And we're actually having a pretty dry year again. Here's the, as of June, the percent of average expected inflows into the various reservoirs. You can see there on the right. The latest, that was the June projection, you know, in the 60% into the Flaming Gorge and Fontenelle, and then into Powell, less than 60%. So another bad year. So this chart, the last three bars there, that's the various projections for the inflow into Lake Powell. So you can see you take those three bars along with the two before that and the last 3 years, regardless of where we land, total for this year are going to be pretty poor years. So not a good trajectory. So what's that mean? Well, so on June 14th, the Bureau of Reclamation Commissioner testified in front of the Senate, said that they need the states to figure out how to reduce consumption 2 to 4 million acre feet a year. That's all 7 states in the Colorado River Basin. That's 15 to 30% of the current consumption. So just a giant reduction that they're looking for. That's in addition to what's already been done. And so there has been some reductions by primarily Arizona, as far as I understand. And then 2 days later, the Secretary of Interior came out and said that basically they want this plan and they don't have a formula. They expect the states to come up with it, and they will take action to protect the reservoirs, Powell and Meade, if the states don't offer something up. So the state engineer's office has been working with the other upper division states, Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah, to come up with a plan. What's that plan likely to be? Well, I just saw the plan, just came out this morning, so I can give you a little bit more than what it's likely to be. But what they told us in Bags, and I'll get into why here in a little bit.
Aaron, can I ask you real quick?
Yeah.
When this ask is being made, does it take into account any of the previous concessions? So, you know, if we cut by 5% and nobody else cut, does that take into account? Do you get credit for that? Or is it like, hey, starting now, going forward, this is what we're asking?
Well, so I personally didn't see a lot of clarity in the ask, and it was kind of on top of what's already been done. We need to come up with 2 to 4 million acre feet. Now, what the state engineer suggested is the Bureau and the Secretary of Interior don't have a lot of things that they can press on Wyoming to force us to do. Unless we'll get into curtailment here in a minute, unless we're below what we owe the southern states, the 7.5 million, 75 million acre feet over 10 years. If we fall below that, then they can force curtailment. Anything beyond that is really thought of as voluntary. Other than the Bureau controls a couple key reservoirs, which in the past, what have they done? And so what are they likely to do? Well, they control Fontenelle and they control the gorge. And so if we don't offer something, I think what the state engineer was thinking is the Bureau may come out, and we ought to be expecting it, even if we offer something, is they may go after additional releases out of Flaming Gorge in future years, specifically next year, maybe the year after. And so I'm not sure that anything that's been done in the past is going to count going forward. They really weren't specific, as I understand it, on what they're looking for. They did say it's on top of what's already been done, and they gave a very wide range, right? 2 to 4 million acre feet. That's a giant range, 15 to 30%. So just on this chart, the key thing is on the right side. So 2018 to 2021, the hydrology has been about 73% of average the last 3 years, and the last 20 years, it's about 88% of average. Why is that important? If you look at this slide, the red squares represent scenarios where Lake Powell drops below 3490, which is the minimum power pool. And so if you look at that middle category, 64 to 79%, which is where we've been the last 3 years, it's a very good likelihood that this is the reason they're asking for the additional reductions, because they're worried that Lake Powell, and if you looked at a Lake Mead chart, just in interest of time, focus on Powell, looks the same. We're likely to drop below the minimum power pool, which is what they're trying to protect. And so then you can see over to the side, what are the reductions necessary to keep Powell and Mead at the various elevations. And you look at the numbers in the scenario of a 64 to 79% scenario go across, you need somewhere between kind of roughly 2 million acre feet. That's the minimum. If we have a super dry year, we need 4 million acre feet. That's really what's driving the request here, is there's not enough water in the system to protect Powell if we have more dry years without conservation, or at least that's what the numbers are saying. So again, what's likely to happen? So what happened in the past? So there was releases from the upper basin reservoirs in 2021. And then of course, in 2022, had the upper basin reservoirs, primarily Flaming Gorge. And so there's some concern that that will happen again. So what is the state engineer? What was offered in the letter I just saw, and what they thought they were going to offer, is they're looking at reinstituting the system conservation program, which was roughly 5 years ago, 7 years ago. And my understanding of that is that in essence, there was dollars that were available for primarily agriculture to shut off irrigation for certain parts of the year. And then we're paid some funding to leave some water in the river. And so that's what they're really offering. They're also suggesting they want to open up the demand management program, which, I think my round numbers is Wyoming could, through conservation efforts, could bank roughly 70,000 acre feet a year if the demand management program was put in place, which is a small amount. I mean, we use 550,000 acre feet a year in Wyoming. So we could bank a portion of what we currently use through conservation efforts if demand management goes forward. But primarily, it looks like system conservation is what the upper states are offering. I don't know if you guys have anything else to offer on that you heard differently. Okay, just a quick review, Colorado River Compact. So basically the upper states guaranteed in that compact that they would deliver 75 million acre feet over a 10-year rolling period at Lee's Ferry, the outlet of Lake Powell, in essence. And if the flow drops below 75 million acre feet over 10 years, then the upper states are subject to curtailment. Now, there's an additional, that was 1922. Any water right perfected after 1922 is subject to curtailment depending on the situation. There's also a Mexican Water Treaty of 1944 that the upper states, one read of it is that the upper states, in addition to the 75 million over 10 years, could be liable for another 750,000 acre feet a year, which would put you at 82.5 million acre feet over 10 years. The reason that's important is there's different interpretations of that. We're currently likely to be around 85 million acre feet over the 10-year rolling period at the end of this year, down from 88 last year. We had a big year that dropped off, smaller year coming on. And so you can think of, if the 82.5 million with the Mexican water treaty is the trigger, it may not be that many years out if we continue to have dry years, especially since they're projecting, to let 7 million acre feet or less out of Lake Powell next year. My understanding is likely under what the secretary is going to do to protect the minimum power pool, unless we have a really wet year. So just curtailment. So this is Wyoming immune? The first calculation, if there is curtailment, if we fall short, they first look at the last 10 years for the upper states and look at what state is overusing their share of the available water. And available is the key, because again, that's open to interpretation. So this is one interpretation of available, but that's the first calculation. So we're back to, we hear, well, Wyoming is not using their 14% of the original thought of how much water was in the river. So there's more to be apportioned out in Wyoming. Well, we won't get into the second calculation, just in the interest of time. So if you look at using that first calculation, could Wyoming be subject to that curtailment? Let's look at the Lake Powell average inflow, and this is what the state engineer ran us through. 6.8 million acre feet of inflow into Lake Powell. The upper basin's usage was estimated at 4 million during those years, roughly average. So what that means is one interpretation of available would be that 10.8 million acre feet, right? The amount that went in less what was used. Our obligation, 7.5 million acre feet a year, 75 million over 10. That's the obligation. And then the Mexico water treaty obligation, another 7.5 million acre feet. That means what's available. One interpretation for the upper states is 2.5 million acre feet a year. So if you use that interpretation, look at our 14% of that 2.5 million, that's 360,000 acre feet a year, 0.36 million. Our current usage is estimated somewhere between 0.5 and 0.6 million acre feet a year. And so even though maybe under the original compact, our 550 million is well below our 14% of what was thought to be available, if we continue to have dry years that go into that 10-year look back period, this interpretation would say Wyoming could be subject to curtailment under that first calculation, even if Colorado, Utah, maybe we often hear people think they're using a larger percentage of their allocation, we could still be using more than our share as well. So again, interpretations, I think my guess is, in a couple of years, if we get close to that 82.5 million acre feet, there'll be a lot of litigation that will open up to try to figure all this out. Because right now, at least the state engineer's office communicated to me their thought, and of course the upper basin's view is that 75 million acre feet is the trigger, that the Mexico water treaty is not subject to the trigger. However, they also acknowledged that others are going to interpret that different, and so it's likely to be litigated and challenged. And so I think when we get close to 82.5 million, if we have some more dry years, we'll start to see some things happening. And I think that's part of what's driving, my own view is that's part of what's driving the Secretary of Interior to say, hey, can the states, what can you offer up for more reductions? Now, within that, I think there was also some information came out. There has been some reductions in the southern states, but it appears they're still overusing their share by in the order of 1.5 million acre feet a year, I think is what my math says. So, I'm optimistic. I hope that a big chunk of what the Secretary of Interior tries to enforce is that the lower states will have to get back to their Colorado River Compact allocation as part of that. And then, look into the upper states, what are we going to do to help fulfill a little bit more of that reduction? So just open it up to questions with that.
Thank you. An important subject and one that we hear about often and we think about often, and not a lot of clarity in some areas. And well, one thing that's very clear is there is not enough water, but how it gets divided is much more difficult. Questions for Mr. Reckler? Comments?
Yeah, can we get your PowerPoint? Can Sally get that PowerPoint?
Certainly, Commissioner.
Thanks
Yep,
for,
we'll send it
thanks for
over.
coming to share with us today.
Also, Ron has a zip drive that has all of the Colorado River, the law of the river documents that the state engineer's office has shared with us. And so he'll make that available to you as well.
We have that already.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent reading.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions, comments?
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. And we didn't have to go to a day-long meeting and we got the same good stuff. So that's awesome. Thank you. Tab F, continuation of discussion on placement of 1 mil assessed valuation on the ballot for those lands in Sweetwater County in the Little Snake River Conservation District. And Senator Hicks, are you presenting? Oh, no, Dave just stood up. Okay.
I'll begin. I'm Jack Cobb. I'm chairman of the Conservation
Thank you.
District. Been there for about 32 years. Been a big believer in natural resource and preserving the natural resource and the ranchers, the wildlife people, everybody that uses our public lands and our private lands. And I just glad that we can come back and give it, an update on some information that we was missing before. And hopefully our discussion can lead us into, okaying the petition for 1 mil to continue what we've done in our Little Snake River Valley and that part of the Sweetwater County for the resource. Just as a benefit ranchers, it benefits wildlife enthusiasts, everything there is to do about natural resources. That's what our job is. It's been my job for 32 years to be on the commission, Conservation District, to do that. And I'd just like to turn it over to Larry Hicks, our resource coordinator, to answer any questions that you may have. And hopefully we can get this petition okayed and get on with our business of taking care of the natural resources. So, Larry.
Thank you, Chairman Cobb. Senator Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I would be remiss not to recognize a couple of other of our board members here. We have Bob Davis, has been a county commissioner on the Conservancy District, the Water Conservancy Conservation District, appointed by the governor. He's now chairman of the Parimutuel Commission to become the gaming commission for the state of Wyoming. As a ranch that's in Sweetwater and Carbon County, Wyoming. And also a candidate for House of Representatives for Sweetwater and Carbon County. I also have with me Tom Chant, multi-generational rancher, a lot of ties to this community as ranches in both Sweetwater and Carbon County. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'd like to do is just kind of pick up real quick. The rationale for this is we wanted the full commission here. I'm not going to go back through the full PowerPoint presentation. Like the commissioners have that available to them if you've had a chance to review that. But what I'd like to do is pick up and just try to answer some of the questions that came out of our last discussion that we had with the commission, and then get into a question and answer session. This is where we kind of left off last time. This just talks about some of the activities that we've been able to accomplish in the Little Snake Conservation District. This just shows the last 3 years, 3 fairly large grant projects that we're the spearhead on these. We work with numerous federal and state partners. In 2020, we received $2.5 million of state and federal funding for a watershed plan and develop an environmental impact statement for a storage reservoir in the Little Snake River Basin. Those are federal and state funds. 2021, we just notified the other day, they've increased that award to $8.48 million from when we met with you 3 weeks ago. That is for the entire Yampa Little Snake River Basin. We are the point of contact and the recipient for all of those federal dollars. 2022, we just received in April $1.451 million appropriations from the federal government. This is coming through what they call the Joint Feast Program. It's a cooperative effort between the NRCS and the Forest Service. We will administer 1.45 million of that total 2.8. We're in the process of resubmitting that for another $1.8 million next year in federal funding. Yeah, I'm gonna have to phone a friend. Oh, there we go. Just a couple of things to talk about, some of the activities that we've historically done in Sweetwater County. This is just a chart that goes back to 2000. It shows just the small water projects that we've done in Sweetwater County proper. All totaled from 2020 on is a little over $1 million in grant money that we've put into Sweetwater County. Stock water pipelines, ponds, solar conversions of windmills, a lot of infrastructure, renewable resources. And then the total project cost is just a little more than double of that.
And all those were Sweetwater County benefited from those, but did not contribute financially to those.
Those were grant dollars that came in, and then working with the project sponsor.
Okay,
So when we talk about grant dollars, those are actually the ones that were awarded to the conservation district. So that other project fund, which is about 50% grant, a lot of those were private contributions by landowners. Some of them was by the Bureau of Land Management, Wyoming Game and Fish Department, Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. A lot of these, because they service also that wildlife component, they're not just all agricultural projects. So BP Amico actually gave us $360,000 at one point in time to go out and replace artesian wells they were plugging in the greater Wamsutter area to maintain those. These are artesian wells that have been there for decades. They had some liability. They contracted back with the conservation district to go out and drill 12 wells to replace those for the wildlife and the livestock. Just in small water projects. And that's just that little corner over there. I put this together and I showed you last time. So the blue is actually our mill levy from 2014 through 2022. So those are the tax receipts that we've received on the Carbon County side. We've had a mill levy since it was first passed in November of 1990. So for 32 years, we've been mill levy funded. We have a tremendous working relationship with the county commissioners, and we have for 32 years in Carbon County. We have ranged from the initial mill levy when it passed in 1990 of $69,000 up to a high, no similar to the assessed valuation of Sweetwater County. In the mid 2000s, 2006, 2007, we were running about $1 million mill levy through the conservation district. So it's fluctuated wildly. And we'll talk a little bit about that source of revenue. But one of the things I did want to show you is so the blue is the mill levy. The red is the grant money that we brought in as a conservation district. So, and then the yellow, I went and pulled your budget information from the last couple of years. So the yellow is the grant money that the Sweetwater County had brought in. And so if we look at that comparison, we brought in $17.5 million in grant money through the conservation district in the last 4 years. These are add-ons. This is an add-on to what Sweetwater County is already doing with that 14 or 15 million that the county brought in. We brought in another $17 million. We employ professional grant writers. That is the majority of my job, is to go out and find the money, bring it in. And then let's talk about a very important thing. Where's all that money go? So I had my staff just whip this out yesterday, just some of the contractors and materials men. So these are the contractors. Where did that $17 million go that we brought in? It stayed in the local and regional economies. It's jobs. Excavation, we're trying to retrain much of our oil field workforce to make sure that we can maintain those jobs in the economy. Ready Oil Field Services based in Rock Springs. Several of these are out of Wamsutter, D&D Oil Field Services. But these are all contractors in Sweetwater and Carbon County. That's where the bulk of that grant money goes back to those contractors to perform that work. In the words of my chairman, it's really all about jobs in the local and regional economy. it's about, and I think earlier, some of the conversation, I would parrot what Commissioner Wendling said. It's about return on our investment, folks. It's about building infrastructure. Opportunity to double our money. Commissioner Smith. Anyway, I think based on our conversation with the commission last time, this is the root of the conversation that we need to have with you guys, is a conversation on taxation of non-renewable and renewable natural resources. And it's interesting, we just did the Colorado thing because it'll pair or dovetail right into with some of the stuff that I think this is the direction that we go as a conservation district. We know that the majority of tax revenues is going to be derived. I think Assessor Davis has given you guys the numbers. It's about $80,000 on real property. Not dissimilar on the other side of the county line as our existing taxing district for the conservation district. It's always been 90% plus ad valorem taxes on oil and gas. That's where the tax revenue is. You guys know that as the commissioners. And so what do we do with that? And just as an example, as I thought to throw out there, in 1979, the legislature passed the Water Development Act. And what that was basically a 1.5% excise tax on coal and a 0.167 severance tax on the production of oil and gas. The concept was taken these one-time renewable resources. Once that mineral is produced and in the pipeline, it's gone. You could never get it back. Any potential revenue is gone. You will never get it back. And so the concept in 1979 was to take a small percentage of that mineral wealth and create intergenerational wealth and opportunity and to build our infrastructure for our economy for the future. And it was to make that investment. So I can just show you an example since 1979, we've taken those tax dollars and invested over $8 billion in water infrastructure in the state of Wyoming. A good example of that is the Green River Rock Springs Sweetwater Commissioners Joint Water Board. I wasn't able to get the numbers, but I am aware of it being chairman of the Select Water Committee. The state's invested millions of that into that Joint Powers Board. That came from mineral revenues from the vision that those people had to take those non-renewable resources, a small percentage of that tax, and invest it back into our communities, our state, and our economy. Just in the 2022 legislature, and I was glad you had the update on the Colorado River issue. The legislature appropriated $1.7 million to do the environmental impact statement on Fontenelle Reservoir for the state to be able to exercise our right to acquire that entire pool, 393,000 acre feet in Fontenelle. We also appropriated $25 million to actually put that water under contract, and that is to protect the municipalities, because under the Colorado River program, whether we do a demand management or curtailment, the burden lies with our municipalities and our industries because they're all post-compact water rights. So you're talking about a $300 million industry with Trona is going to be one of the first ones regulated off the system. We are making this investment from those oil and gas and those coal excise taxes and turning around and investing that back in to protect our municipal water interests and our heavy industry interests. Because every one of those is junior under a prior appropriation system. They're the first ones. Invest back in your community. They're one-time resources. It really is a case, and I think visionary of the state and we as elected officials to say, what legacy do we want to leave? Can we take a little bit now to invest into our infrastructure and our people and our economy for now and in the future? That's what we're asking you guys to support doing. I did pull the statutory information out here. I just wanted to show you. It says up to 1 mill levy. This is 11/16/133. This is the statutory reference that we're asking you guys to support this at this point in time. Up to 1 mill. That's what we're asking for. An investment in the future, a partnership in managing the resources in this county and the counties associated with it. It's not dissimilar to what you guys have as commissioners under the Wyoming Constitution, under Article 15, Section 5, that says you may levy up to 12 mills. Not all counties levy all 12 mills. In fact, there's one that only does 7 3/4 of a mill, and another county that only does 11 1/4 mill. And historically, there's been other counties that didn't assess the entire tax burden. It's a discretionary thing. Each county, no different than each conservation district, needs to determine what that need is and then budget accordingly. And so, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, I just wanted to prevent that information and again, stand before you and ask any questions or answer any questions you may have and have a conversation. And let's have the conversations that need to be had. So with that, Mr. Chairman, it's the end of the presentation, but I know there's questions, so I'd love the opportunity to continue this, and hopefully we can expedite this and help get you guys back on schedule.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. Appreciate the presentation and appreciate your time yesterday and spending with me, chatting and catching me up to date, as well as informing me more about this to make it easier to make a decision on this. And for the public, we are not deciding on a tax. We were just deciding to put this on the ballot for the voters to decide who are in this area. So with that, questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Wendling.
some of the questions might be answered or may increase if we could hear from our tax assessor. Mr.
Absolutely.
Davis.
Mr. Davis.
I'm Dave Davis. I'm the Sweetwater County Assessor. And I was asked after the last discussion to put some information together for you to decide how much each mill or a portion of a mill would generate based on the boundary of the conservation district. So Megan from the GIS department was able to draw out the boundary, and she was able to give me a list of landowners in that area. And what we did is calculated the assessed value times. I used the maximum of one levy, 1 mill, and then I did 3/4 of a levy, half a mill, 25%, and then 1/10 of a mill to actually get dollar amounts. And what I did is I broke it up among the real property that Megan had identified in the boundary, but a bigger portion of that value actually comes from the industrial property. So we kind of had to finagle this a little bit, but basically what we came up with was that the industry, and I'm only talking about plant sites, I'm talking about compressor stations, I'm talking about industrial property. The real property would generate a full mill in that boundary would generate about $5,000 worth of property taxes, but the industrial property would generate almost $75,000. So that's the difference between the two allocations. Now, what Mr. Hicks is talking about is in addition to that, any producing wells that would produce oil and gas in that would be subject to this taxation as well. So we can't just include the real, we can't just include the industrial, we can't just include the minerals. If it's within that boundary and it's extracted or being valued within that boundary, it will be taxed. So that mill levy would apply to all of that property. Okay, now just for your, I went through this morning just a little bit. I just want to make sure you understand there's a lot of landowners out there. I mean, a lot of landowners, like 1,600 accounts are what out there now. Some of those are BLM. And you've got that spreadsheet, and it was, way down at the bottom is where we ended up. But like Rock Springs Grazing had 115 accounts. Stratton Sheep Company had 22, Vermilion Ranch had 22. Wamsutter EMP is another one, and I didn't get to that number before the meeting started. But there are a ton of properties out there who will actually be taxed. If this mill levy, if it's allowed to go on the ballot and it is passed by the voters, then it will tax a bunch of those properties or all of those properties out in that area. So I hope that makes that clear. Is there any questions for me?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
A question for Mr. Davis, and this may actually have to bounce over to Clerk Lane. But how many, you said over 800 property owners, but how many actual voters are in that area?
That would be our county clerk that would have to answer that question.
Good morning, Chairman. Well, let me see what time it is. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Cindy Lane, Sweetwater County Clerk. I went through all of the addresses that were given by Megan Toomer of our GIS department, and I found 5 registered voters in the area.
Thank you. Other questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Wendling.
would it be appropriate to ask legal a question?
Yes.
Mr. De Leon? Have you had time to review the statutes? Look at this.
I have.
What do the statutes say about the decision makers? Are they registered voters or are they landowners?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Wendling, so the statute identifies that qualified electors vote, not landowners. So with some districts, they specifically identify in the Principal Act that landowners will participate in a voting process. For the Conservation District, the Principal Act does not identify that landowners will vote. And so the definition that is used is a qualified elector, which is, as Clerk Lane identified, those voters that are registered.
Commissioner Toman.
I guess the point I would say that Little Snake River Conservation District has a team that's ready to implement a lot of these projects that's going to come down through ARPA, Build America Back, America Beautiful. And the federal agencies are not ready to accept those funds. And I know that district has done a lot, like on the Medbo Forest, they did a lot of the, and you might want to speak to that a little bit. But they've been able to put projects on the ground because they have the people who can implement them. They have the engineers. A lot of times the money comes for projects, but there's no money for implementing them, to get the engineers to draft the designs and to write the grants. And I don't know if you want to speak to that just a little bit more, maybe, Larry?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, just to highlight that a little bit, at 2 o'clock, I've got a conference call with the chief of the National Forest Service, the regional forester. And there is a lot of money, as you guys are well aware of. You had the discussion with the ARPA. You know what other hat I wear as a 4 years on appropriations committee for the state of Wyoming. We've been flooded with, and it's created some problems, but it's created some opportunities. We have the ability and have, in fact, we were just notified yesterday of another $176,000 award from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is targeted towards sage grouse. And so why is that important? Because it's regulatory avoidance. You want to have a negative impact on the industries of Sweetwater County, just put them on the endangered species list. And so that money is specifically targeted. So a lot of the work that we do with these federal dollars is to turn around and provide either regulatory avoidance from a delisting scenario, regulatory certainty, or we are advocating for that tax base, that oil and gas, coal, minerals, recreation, agriculture, tax base for the NEPA and the federal land use planning process. And I hope that answers your question. I think we've been able to demonstrate that we're pretty proficient in working with this. We currently have cooperative agreements with the Forest Service, the NRCS, the Bureau of Reclamation, the BLM, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. All of those federal agencies funnel money through the conservation districts through those cooperative agreements. And it gets back to what Commissioner Toman talking about. It's very difficult in this environment for particularly these regional and local offices to deploy capital. So BLM runs much of their fuels budget through us. They run part of their 8100 budget, which is their range improvement. They've run a lot of their fencing stuff for wildlife migration corridor. We can deploy those monies, and we can use local contractors where they can. They have to go through a state bidding process that goes through. We're more likely to get a fencing contractor out in Nevada than we are in Sweetwater, or Carbon County. If you go through the same thing with well drillers. You know, we've done a lot of well drilling in Sweetwater County. We're able to use guys regionally, and we buy our parts regionally. We get our supplies from Casper. It is a very good program to have those cooperative relationships with the federal government. And it also gives us a key up because they advocate for this as a methodology that works, because they're able to show those widgets as actually getting accomplished. They're getting their work done, folks. And that then feeds the system of the federal government to continue to award those people that are getting that money spent out on the ground and being able to show those results associated with it. Well, Mr. Chairman, I know it's the elephant in the room, and if I had an opportunity, if I could address the voter issue.
Feel free.
As you're all aware, most of this is big block BLM ground. Nobody can live there because it belongs to the federal government. And then we have the checkerboard that's controlled by, and I think the county assessor. It's fairly large landowner. So there's just not a lot of people out there. There's a lot of federal minerals out there. When we sit down and started this process, our first cut was much closer and smaller, and there's nobody lives in that part of Sweetwater County. And then we got bigger, and then we got smaller, and we went through these scenarios. And quite frankly, we didn't know how many people lived out there. We actually expected to be more than that. The simple fact is, as I've asked my question, what is the right number of voters? I don't know what that answer is. And maybe the commission has an idea of what is the appropriate number of voters you need to have to be able to put this on the ballot and ask the question. Do we need to go in and pull a couple of city blocks out of Wamsutter so we get a number? I don't know. I'm asking you guys for maybe a little guidance on this, but I certainly have not had an epiphany in the last 48 hours of what the appropriate number of voters is. I don't think that's as important as the accountability side of the equation. Not only are we accountable to those voters, we're accountable to every single taxpayer out there. We're accountable to you as commissioners, and we're accountable to those companies. What I would tell you is give us a chance. Give us a chance. Give us an opportunity. That's all we're asking. And then let's be accountable. Buck stops here, folks. And that's all we're asking. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would stand for any additional questions if there is.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, almost seeing none.
No, I don't have a question.
Oh, go ahead then.
Mr. Chairman, I'll
Yes,
make a
Commissioner Shin.
motion to approve the petition. And I don't know if you want me to read the whole thing. I can. The Sweetwater County Commissioners pursuant to Wyoming State Statute 1116 134B, the Little Snake River Conservation District Board of Supervisors is petitioning the Sweetwater County Commission for the purposes of placing the proposition to impose a conservation tax, district tax to the voters, a 1 mil tax assessment to each $1 of assessed valuation for those lands in Sweetwater County that are encompassed within the boundaries of the Little Snake River Conservation District at the next general election pursuant to Wyoming State Statute 22-21-103, or by a mail ballot pursuant to Wyoming Statute 22-29-115 and 22-29-116. Pursuant to 1116-134C, the Little Snake River Conservation District Board has selected the language in 1116-134C to be included on the election ballot.
Mr.
Thanks.
Chairman, I would second that.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Wendling.
I would ask that the commissioners like take a look at that motion, and we have the opportunity to break that down into increments of quarter, if we wish, half, 3/4, up to 1 mil, and see if anybody is. Are you totally comfortable with a mil, or do you want to reduce it to, per se, a half or a quarter, commissioners?
We have a motion at 1 mil. Is there any feeling to change that?
Mr. Chairman, I just see the amount that we're looking at, obviously not from extraction, but it's not I think that the amount that we're looking at total potentially is reasonable. And the additional, I guess, lowering it doesn't make sense to me at this point.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Remember, what we're looking at dollars that we know of are real property. They have nothing to do with the mineral taxes, which again, as could occur, it could go, 1 mil could raise anywhere up to $1 million. And that burden would be carried primarily on, I believe Black Butte's part of that within the boundaries, if I'm not mistaken, as well as some of the big oil and gas industries and them carrying the brunt of it as we see in the past. As I've expressed in the past, our big industries have always favored a special purpose tax versus another mill levy because they are already paying on their mill levies based on 100% of their value, where we know in residential and other business are either 9.5 to 11.5. So again, industry is carrying the brunt. Nice thing about special purpose, it's carried by everybody as well as the visitors. And industry has always supported that. I do know, talking with industry, they've always favored, they said they would favor a mill levy as long as everyone else is paying their equal share as well. And I think that belief is everybody paying 100% and not 9.5 and 11.5 and then 100. So just kind of keep that in mind, that there's great amount of value in minerals and that could be raised. And that burden lies primarily on those big industries and not little landowners or that type of thing. Second of all, if we're talking about giving a chance, there's an opportunity to give a chance. We know that the entire conservation district is funded out of the general fund. And they use that money to to apply for grants and get additional dollars as well as for their operations. The size of Sweetwater County Conservation District now has been reduced considerably. If the real estate taxes will raise approximately $80,000, and I think it'd be give the conservation district an opportunity by having earmarking our conservation district earmarking $80,000 for Snake River this year, next year out of the budget, whatever we give them. You know, that's a chance to see how they operate and see how it comes, and then provide them an opportunity to come before us in 2 years and request a referendum at that point in time. So as you can see, I will be voting no against it because I'm going to say this 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when I was part of the conservation district, yes, it was a conversation. And I always felt that prior to the application going to the agriculture, and I said it, even to the chairman at that time, when you're ready to move forward, take the time and come and talk with the commission so we can talk about the pros and cons of that decision. That has not happened. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Wendling.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Shanefield.
I just wanted to make one comment in regard to Commissioner Wendling's comments. Our industry around here, and I speak from working with many of them, that they also have out of state locations, and they're paying a significant amount more of state taxes anywhere else that they are than they are when they're coming here to Sweetwater County. And I think that in discussion with them, they expect to pay taxes. There's not a hindrance. We actually had the conversation with Governor Gordon when he was here, and that we say, oh yeah, we've got a great, situation. We don't have any state taxes here. And they're like, yeah, so what? That's not a concern of theirs. And so I do agree that they're carrying the brunt, but they're also using our land and our property. to better their companies and to make money off of, the land that we have here in Sweetwater County, and that we should hold them accountable for taking care of that land.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Tillman.
just one more comment is that the conservation districts are the only local entity that actually looks out for the natural resources with the federal agencies and actually enhances and protects their ability to function on property in our county. So I would just add that.
Thank you. Other comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Lloyd.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say something.
You
but,
would be remiss. Yes.
But I think the first is, one thing to remember, I think about the conservation districts is there's a similarity of the conservation district members and us as commissioners because they're actually elected. And of all the other boards that we work with, they're not elected. Typically, they're appointed. So I do think it's important to say there's some equivalency to the fact in their decision-making because of them being elected. I will also tell you up until about 4:45 yesterday, I was completely 100% on voting yes on this. I will be honest and tell you there is a struggle with knowing 5 voters host such a large wielding of power over what could be a large dollar amount because of the minerals, because we don't know what that is. And I struggle with that a little bit to say that. And I mean, I also struggle, what if there's a low voter turnout and there's no votes, or there's one voter? To let that make a representative choice does concern me. So I'll be honest, I sit here not knowing exactly where I'm going to vote till we get the roll call, but I do see the validity in what you do. I do see the validity in that you're exercising your elected positions. I do believe there's been time and research put into this. My concern is the number of constituents that could be making this decision equal to the value of how big that decision is. And it's my only concern. And so I think what you guys do is great. I see your list of projects. I believe if you partner with some of these industries, they'll benefit from this. So I see that, but I just really struggle with that. That's a lot of responsibility for up to 5 voters. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I have a few minutes to be quiet and to make a decision now. So
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. And I'll say that's just, there's 5 registered voters. So if we could do a get out the vote, we could get it to like 7, 8, maybe 9. I don't know. We got to run some, get out there and go
Rabbit,
door to door, whatever it is. Yeah. Maybe 10. I don't know. We could get up to 10. Any other comments?
That's a legislative question. It's not our question. So Senator Hicks, you have to fix that from the legislative side. It's not our job.
Very good. Then we have a motion. We have a second. Good discussion. Thank you. We'll do roll call. We'll start with Commissioner Lloyd. We'll start at the far end.
Glad you made the decision.
Yes.
I will note for the record that he is the liaison for our conservation district, and Commissioner Wendling was our liaison prior to him. I'll just put
I
that
think
in there for the record.
So give me 1 sec. We'll just marinate anything out.
We got time. We're only an hour
I'm going to go
behind.
ahead
So
and I'm going to vote yes.
Yay. Oh.
Commissioner Tillman,
Yes.
Commissioner Shanefield,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith, yes. Commissioner Wendling.
No.
We passed 4-1, and this will be placed on the ballot. So great discussion. Thank you for the presentation, and
Good luck.
especially for the time outside of this meeting to help educate all of us. And thank you, Mr. Davis and staff, for running all the numbers to give us an idea, and Ms. Lane as well, so we can make an informed decision. Much appreciated.
Keep up the good work, gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you.
We're scheduled for our 10:10 break.
11:10.
At 11:10.
Just 1 hour off.
That's solid. Do we need a break? Continue on. Okay. Carry on tab G. Thank you. The Carbon Capture Inc. project presentation. And I think I saw that Sally had just emailed us that presentation. If I remember correctly.
In our drive, right, Sally?
Oh, it's in the drive. Sorry, not. Okay. And
Commissioner
who is
Smith, do they need
presenting?
to sign anything before they leave, or it's all up to us? We have to sign the resolution, yeah.
Oh, we just signed the resolution.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Chairman and Commission. Thank you for having me. My name is Kylie Ingersoll. I'm the Southwest Regional Director for the Wyoming Business Council, and I would just like to introduce Patricia with Carbon Capture to talk about opportunities in Sweetwater County.
Thank you. Would you like a chair to sit in? We can, yeah, okay. So we don't mean to make you stand up. And, yeah. How about put it down on the lower level and kind of bend it over to her?
I can reach it. I think that's fine, as long as the mic works.
There we go. Look at this teamwork.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us here today. My name is Patricia Loria. I'm a VP of a company called Carbon Capture, Inc. that's based out of California. I'm actually in DC. This seems a lot nicer than where I come from. So
You're
beautiful,
welcome. Welcome to have you.
beautiful area out here. I have a couple of teammates with me. That is Megan Kenny and Jason Miller back there. And they're kind of, we're looking at projects. And so let me start. So we are a direct air capture company, which means that we are building machines to take CO2 out of the atmosphere. And then our plan is to store that underground. And we're exploring doing projects in Sweetwater County. And so we just wanted to take this opportunity to start to get to know the commissioners, answer questions about the project and the technology and the business opportunity, so that when we're ready to kind of get to that stage of final decisions and announcements, we know that you've been briefed and have kind of some understanding of what we're looking at. So first and foremost, as I said, we're a DAC company based out of LA. We have a North America focus on what we're doing, and we're creating technology, and I'll kind of go through what that means a little bit later, but we're also developing projects. So carbon capture is a broad category, right? That captures technologies that can both reduce CO2 from an emission source, and that could be from a power plant, it could be from a steel or cement facility, it could be from a soda ash facility, or that type of technology can be used to take CO2 out of the air. And that is what we're doing with our company. We have raised $43 million to date, so we're still small and just about 35 people, but we have intentions to grow very large because we really think there's a huge business opportunity here. And that's some of what I'll be educating you about as we think that that could be a big opportunity for this area of the state. So according to the IPCC report, in order to stay below 1.5 degrees global warming, not only are we going to need to reduce our carbon footprint significantly, meaning all around the world, but we're also going to need to take CO2 out of the atmosphere. And that gives kind of a pathway as to how much of that we're going to need to do. And the numbers look about like 100 gigaton. Now, when we kind of map out how many facilities will be needed to do this type of work, how much storage resources we're going to need, we're actually talking about $1 trillion industry, an industry that can be as large as the oil and gas industry. And what we're here to talk to you about is we think we can have the first American plant for this in Sweetwater County that could put this county and the whole state in the opportunity to be a real first mover in this global business. There's been a lot of things that have been converging to make this possible. There is considerable government support. So the infrastructure bill that was passed last year has provisions for $3.5 billion for DAC funds, and that's in addition to probably about another 100 million or so that the Department of Energy will spend on both carbon safe, so looking at geological sequestration, looking at improving DAC technologies, et cetera. There are also corporations who are willing to purchase these carbon removal credits. So as I said, we will take this CO2 out of the air and store it underground in Sweetwater. And we have buyers who will potentially buy that at upwards of $800 a ton for carbon removed. Now, those are early buyers, and those buyers are likely looking for us to reduce our costs over time, and we have plans to do that. But it is kind of a really exciting opportunity for business right today, and there's broad public acceptance. You know, right now, I would say one of the ways we gauge that is through the environmental NGO community. We have the Nature Conservancy and the Wyoming Outdoor Council who are advising us on our projects and know about the importance for direct air capture. So a lot of these environmental NGOs see this as an important way to do this clean energy transition that we believe we need. And here's just a list of some of those corporate buyers who have made commitments of the amounts that we've talked about, things like $800 a ton for a carbon removal credit. So as you can see, these are generally large corporations, very big corporations.
Commissioner Wendling.
I'm sorry.
No, glad to take questions. I realize this is
keep
new
hearing
content.
That you're going to have the ability to sell the carbon. Have these companies that are interested indicated what they're going to use that for?
So there's two different models. Let me kind of go to.
Well, if you're going to get to that.
Yeah.
If you're eventually going to get to that, then stay on track. I can
Okay,
wait.
sure, yes.
I can wait.
Absolutely. Okay. I was going to move to this next slide anyway. So this is essentially what a project could look like. So in order to feed our direct air capture systems, we are going to need clean energy. That doesn't necessarily mean renewable energy. It's any zero carbon. So we are looking at natural gas kind of based systems where we're capturing the CO2 out of that for our first pilots, but it could be nuclear, it could be wind or solar. And one of the exciting reasons why we looked at Wyoming beyond our the Class 6 primacy, which we'll talk about before, is obviously Governor Gordon has done a great job of looking at the state as an energy all of the above approach. So looking at nuclear, looking at kind of other forms of clean energy, and we think that could be very attractive as we move forward. So I'll talk a little bit more about the technology in the next slide, but then essentially for this project, what we're looking at is geological sequestration. Also, the Department of Energy has spent a lot of money supporting mostly as administered through the University of Wyoming through its carbon safe grants, looking at geological sequestration opportunities in the state that could support both point source sequestration or point source carbon capture projects, as well as these direct air capture projects. And as a result of some of that early work, the state did get Class 6 primacy, along with the state of North Dakota. That makes it very attractive for us to have kind of first movers here. So generally what we're hearing is if we want to get a Class 6 well permitted in any of the other 48 states, generally the EPA, the federal EPA is talking about 3 years waiting time, whereas hopefully in the state of Wyoming, we can do that in a year. And that's certainly an important part of us moving quickly towards a new project. I will tell you, one of our potential sequestration partners, Frontier Carbon, is also here. That's Robbie Rocky, the CEO. And so he's available to kind of answer questions that are related to kind of sequestration and the work that they've been doing in Sweetwater County, looking at sequestration. Our goal is to have our first injections by Q3 of next year. That would make this the second direct air capture facility in the world, after a facility that's operating in Iceland with a Swiss company called Climeworks. So really kind of a global leader in this space. So a little bit about our technology. It is modular. What it does, and you can kind of see from these units, each of them are essentially shipping container size so that we can manufacture them off-site. In that manufacturing, we're still looking at where that ultimately manufacturing could be, but that could be in Cheyenne potentially or in other places in Wyoming. We can manufacture those off-site and bring them here. You can't see that in this image, but essentially there's fans at the top. So what we do is run the air through these systems. There are sorbents then that capture that CO2. And then we use a process called temperature swing absorption that then changes that up and removes that CO2 from the sorbent, and then we can take that. And what we're talking about doing for this first project is then compressing it and just storing it underground. And just by storing it underground, a company that has a net zero commitment and who has reduced all their residual emissions, but finds it's so expensive to get to that next stage, will pay us that $800 a ton so that they can do that accounting. In theories, you might have states and the federal government who look to do this in the future as well. The federal government has put forward an act in Congress called the Federal CDR Leadership Act, where they would buy carbon removal credits. It's unlikely that's going to pass this year, but I think we're already seeing that progression where states and the federal government might look to buy these carbon removal credits in addition to corporations and individuals. This Swiss company called Climeworks does actually also sell subscriptions to individuals, which we could do as well. We have potential customers. If we're looking at our first plant to be about 5,000 tons in the first year, and we have interest and kind of letters of intent that we're working on purchasing contracts for about half of that amount already signed. So why am I here today? Hopefully to kind of get you excited about the project. Certainly geological sequestration, and you may have had these conversations around kind of point source capture projects. That is still a new thing. Publics, and communities still need education as to the safety and security of this geological sequestration. There's a long history of it. Again, if we have questions, Robbie can answer them better than we can, but obviously oil and gas companies have been doing this type of subsurface work for decades. The Department of Energy has spent hundreds of millions of dollars looking at geological sequestration. So we are confident that this can be done safely and securely. And we certainly will have that communication with the public. So we want to really find a community that wants to have these types of projects. We don't want to be forcing this project on a community who doesn't think it's in their best interest. So that's why we're trying to do this kind of initial outreach and talk to people in the community, engage their interest in such a project. Also, as we said, we want to do this collaboratively. Not only are we going to need a great sequestration site, we're going to need clean energy that's going to develop along with our facility. And so having kind of a region that's really embracing innovation and development on the energy side is certainly important. And hopefully we believe this will all bring a lot of new jobs and opportunities to the state. We believe that in order to get to kind of a 5 megaton, which is what we hope to do at this site, will be about 2,000 jobs kind of per site. And I would say we do believe that our facility could be the first of many, not only that we would actually develop, but that others in the DAC industry would develop as well. We have worked closely with the Wyoming Business Council. And as I said, there are these DAC hubs. I think that there's going to be opportunities for more of this business in the state. We will hopefully just be the first mover of what could be a big opportunity for the state. These are just kind of some of our partners. And then as we discussed, certainly as one of the first uses of our CO2 will be for general sequestration, but there's actually other things we can do with the CO2 as well. So using CO2 as a feedstock to create synthetic fuel, particularly aviation fuel, has a lot of interest around the world. When you talk about doing that, you're actually not then removing CO2 from the atmosphere. What you're doing is creating an alternative to traditional aviation fuels. But certainly the aviation industry is looking at that. There's also opportunities to make low carbon concrete, and we're involved in some of those pilots, including have a DOE grant to look at a facility in Gary, Indiana, a steel plant, and then use that CO2 that comes off of that and waste heat in order to create low carbon concrete. So again, a lot of exciting opportunities of where this industry could take us. And as I said, we don't have a direct ask today, but we just wanted to start to educate you so that as we get to a place where we're ready to announce a project, you'll at least have heard of us and started to kind of formulate your questions around kind of this technology and this opportunity. I'm so happy to answer any questions myself. And as I said, I have Robbie here too, if there are questions around kind of the geological sequestration side and how we're looking at that.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Laurie?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Shanefield.
Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for coming and getting us on the same page. Speaking from our Economic Development Coalition, we're very excited that you're looking at Sweetwater County. We're very excited that you're interested in Wyoming, and we would love to have you here. We also would love it if you'd have your manufacturing here as well instead of Cheyenne. So I had to say that. However, being in Wyoming, we're still okay with that. My question to you is just space-wise. I know these are modular, but how much space overall do you expect it would take for the units that you're thinking to put here in Sweetwater County?
So, and I'm going to ask kind of Megan and Jason to, Megan's like, I tell you this answer all the time, Patricia, and you forget it. Just to highlight, so there'll be two pieces of that, right? So there will be our modulars and then the clean energy. And so we are kind of thinking about both of those. And one of the things that, I probably did not mention is we are working with groups like the Wyoming Business, the Wyoming chapter, the Nature Conservancy, and the Wyoming Outdoor Council, and the Fish and Game Department to say, where possible, let's use disturbed lands. Let's make sure that we're not in any kind of migratory path. So we're really committed to looking at that. And then depending on what type of clean energy we use, that could have a big effect on the footprint. But I'll let Megan kind of answer the basic question.
I don't have a good estimate on the land required for energy usage because that is dependent on what type of energy we use. But for our modules specifically for a 5 megaton site would be about 200 acres. So for the first phase, less than 2 acres of land would be required.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yes. It just seems like it would be very inefficient to run that kind of operation in Wyoming where we have the cleanest air in the world. It looks like it ought to be next to LA where you could really catch the smog and put it to use faster and more efficiently than here. So that's really hard for me to compute that.
Yes. So, and we have looked at that, and there's been a lot of research the Department of Energy has done on that. And while it feels like that, CO2 actually dissipates quickly. So CO2 is essentially 400 parts per million in the atmosphere, and it's 400 parts per million here, and it's 400 parts per million in LA. It's actually all those things that create that bad air quality aren't CO2, there's smog and particulates, et cetera. So yeah, and even if kind of additionally, even if you had 10 kind of megaton plants in Wyoming, you're still going to be 400 parts per million. You just think that's such a small amount, 400 parts per million, so that it just quickly dissipates in the atmosphere, and our removal actually doesn't really affect the overall concentrations. So it is counterintuitive, but yes, there's been a lot of research done on that topic.
Good question. Other comments, questions? Thank you then. We appreciate your time very much, and it's enlightening and exciting. And yeah, hope that we can help you move forward with the project. Looks like it's quick moving as well, which is even better.
Yes, absolutely. And again, everyone has been fantastic about helping us, making sure that we can look at what's available in the county, and certainly, making sure we kind of feel welcome. So we really appreciate that. I've told kind of Governor Gordon's office, it was between North Dakota and Wyoming, and at the state level, the Wyoming Business Council, the Wyoming Energy Authority, all made it so easy to start work. And then as we get down here, everyone who we've talked to is like, yeah, we want you here. What can we do? So we really appreciate the support.
Awesome. And thanks for making the trip with crutches and a boot. That's not easy. Thank you. Tab H then, University of Wyoming, Sweetwater County Extension Office, new hire approvals.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Not too far behind schedule though, right? Not really. My presence here today is pretty simple. Got to listen to some pretty interesting conversations so far today though, but thank you for having me. As you all know, Sweetwater County Fair is rapidly approaching. Our static show is on the 27th of this month, and then we're going to jump right into fair for like a few days later. And my wonderful administrative assistant has given me her resignation, and her last day will be our static show, the 27th of July. And she is an extreme necessity for fair. Also, my other co-commander, Liz Toman, the FFA advisor here in Green River, should have had her baby a few days ago, but still hasn't. So I'm going to be missing her too. Fair is going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. But I am here to seek your approval to start the rapid search for a new admin, hopefully to be able to have her working before fair starts. So I know I'm working with like maybe 15 days if I'm lucky, but I'm very proactive. So with that, that is why I am here to see you guys today.
It's a simple, straightforward request, I guess. Questions?
Chairman,
Commissioner Wendling.
has this job been advertised?
Not yet. I haven't wanted to do
What are-
that until I spoke to you guys.
What are the policies regarding advertisement for a period of time?
You know, I'd actually have to speak with Ann Roberson. And she's the one that at the university that helps with our hiring and gets them going and interviews. But I know that when I spoke to her last week, she wanted to know if you guys were on board to have this position approved. I told her I was getting on the agenda to speak with you. So I think I can get it done rapidly, but obviously not without being within the appropriate days that we have to be in.
I'd make sure that it follows policy.
Absolutely.
Follows the days and, don't cut any corners.
No rule breaking here.
Okay. All right.
I do have a question. Though. She could hire the temp service or something for the interim with their budget funds.
That would depend on what the policies say of the university.
Okay, I will look into that because I actually have a young lady that's on our auction committee that's very acquainted with our ShowWorks program that might be willing to help even during just the
think
week
the
of fair. So,
University has full oversight on
okay,
employees other than to keep us informed.
okay.
That's correct, I believe, right, John? Help me out a little bit.
So you do have an agreement that you put together for the employees, which would spell out how much the board would be paying. So those employee agreements will be forthcoming, I assume, which will identify the numbers for you.
And also, do we have final approval? Has to be approved by us. Do you recall?
You have approval as to the amount that you provide for each employee. And so I think what's being requested is just the general information. If the board plans to continue, the board has an agreement for 2 employees. One is an educator and one is an assistant. And I think it is essentially delving into the assistant agreement and saying, do you as a board plan to continue to engage in that agreement? The numbers, of course, may vary, as is often the case when you have an old employee, new employee. What those numbers are, that would be something to be discussed and become part of that future agreement.
Are they both? I know yours is full-time. Is that correct?
Yes,
Is the assistance?
I believe so.
You recall?
Yeah, I believe it's
I
full-time.
believe so too.
And this
Yeah.
is be replacing?
Yes.
Yeah, I just make sure you follow policy, make sure you advertise accordingly, because if you get sideways with somebody that felt they should have had an opportunity, weren't given it,
Absolutely.
starts all over.
Yep. And it only gets easier.
Other questions or comments?
Mr.
What-
Chairman.
Commissioner Lloyd?
Yeah, just real quick. I just think that kind of curtailing on what Doc had talked about was, Commissioner Wendling was, you talked about the possible overlap. That would just make sure we're staying within our budgetary pieces. So
Thank you, Commissioner.
Other comments? Then what's your pleasure, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Shanefield.
I'll make a motion to allow the University of Wyoming Sweetwater County Extension Office to work through their hiring process and backfill the position that has been vacated.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yes, I would second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Excellent. Sounds like you got some work to do.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a good one. Be safe
You too.
and enjoy the fair.
On to tab I, request to restaff vacant positions. We start with the detention center. If he's out there. Hello, Mr. McLean.
Back on track?
Oh, yeah.
In
Oh, well,
order.
we've got,
The order down.
That's right.
that's right. We picked up 10 minutes along the way.
Well, all right, we'll do our best.
Thank you. Floor is yours. Talk about the detention center vacant position.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, County Commissioners, before you today, and I have the sheriff here with me to request restaffing a vacancy for a food service worker position in the detention center. For everybody's edification, I just remind the board that it's been several years ago now, and working with the sheriff, we came up with a plan to move the management of the food facilities underneath the detention manager. So we eliminated having two command level positions in there. So we just have the food service worker positions and kind of a lead person there. That's been some significant savings in the department. Before you is a summary for the replacement of that position. As you know, they're operating really with minimal staff in that area. There were a couple times during COVID, I think Sheriff may have even had to deliver a few meals. So I would support and recommend restaffing the vacant food service position. The cost summary is in your packet, and any differences would be based on the health insurance.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. McLean? Then what is your pleasure, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Shanefield.
I will make a motion to restaff the vacant food service worker position as presented and authorize chairman to sign.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Thank you. And back to you, Mr. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, County Commissioners. The second item is also in the Sheriff's Office, is a request to restaff a vacant patrol position. We had a recent resignation in the patrol division. As you know, again, this was an area that following some of the efficiencies that were achieved in the detention center, we looked at some ways and analyzed the patrol area, and basically right now the patrol area is running with the person east, west, north, and south on most of the shifts, and so they're kind of minimal crews to support the very large counties. And so with this vacancy, the sheriff is requesting to fill that. Obviously, the replacement, depending on the level of peace officer that we find, could be between an entry-level basic peace officer, could be an advanced peace officer, professional peace officer. Sometimes we're lucky enough to get somebody who's already professionally certified, but so those costs are represented in your packet. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Again, the sheriff's here with me also.
Thank you. Questions? Then what is your pleasure, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to authorize the sheriff to rehire the vacant patrol position and authorize chairman to sign. Is that appropriate? Okay.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment? Just thank the sheriff for his response to the Farson area. They were upset about the YDOT study on the speeding, and I understand you have been trying to make a presence up there.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Scheduled for a 10:55 break, which
We have Devin up on
we
the.
picked up 15 minutes.
Devin, let's get Devin done and then.
Okay. Devin, you're up.
Morning, Commissioners. I should be able to help you get a few more minutes back here, hopefully. Before you all today is a addendum or amendment to a Federal Aviation Administration grant in the amount of $23,304. This is a grant that was issued for the construction of our snow removal equipment building, and it increases the grant by that amount to help cover the cost of the acquisition of foam testing equipment for our fire trucks here at the airport. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but the grant does cover 93.75% of the cost of this new equipment. The state pays 3.75% and the airport covers 2.5%, and it is included in the airport's budget. Happy to answer any other questions. It is in your inbox, Chairman, for signature, and then it would go to your county attorney for signature as well.
Thank you. Any comments, Ms. Marshall? Sure. Very good. Questions for Mr. Brubaker? That's right. What's your pleasure then, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman. Oh, Doc, you can go ahead.
Commissioner Wendling.
Yes, thank you. I'll make a motion to approve the amendment number 1 to the Federal Aviation Grant Agreement number 3-56-002-5-038-2020 in the amount of $23,304 and authorize the chairman to sign.
Mr. Chairman, I would second that.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? It's a very catchy grant agreement number. I like that. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Mr. Chairman,
Thanks,
I
Devin.
just want to give a shout out to Devin for welcoming our new board appointment, Sean Valentine. He gave a tour of the airport and appreciated that, Sean, or Devin and Sean.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
And would we like a break?
That we can do the next one since they're here.
We can do the next one since they're here. But then, then
Then we can do
Christina's here and Cindy's here and yeah.
We're right down the line. Get them done.
All right.
Let's go.
Tab K, request approval to ratify the 23-24 Community Juvenile Services Board grant contract. Welcome aboard.
Good morning. So I guess this has been all over the place today. So
That has.
Okay.
Here and there and everywhere.
So, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I will be going through the next 3 agenda items, trying to get us on schedule.
So you tricked us into that.
So, and I have Karen Kelly here as wearing the hat of Chairman of the Community Juvenile Services Board. So
Thank you.
this first grant, Sweetwater County was awarded $123,877 from the Wyoming Department of Family Services for the next biennium beginning July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2024. And this grant is actually overseen and recommended by the Community Juvenile Services Board, but the contract goes through the county. The purpose of this grant is to quote unquote, establish, maintain, and promote the development of juvenile services in communities of the state aimed at allowing early identification and diversion of children at risk of entry into the court system and preventing juvenile delinquency. This project, you may remember in the past, the funding was cut the last biennium. So it was reinstated by the legislature this biennium. So this is a difficult situation. You don't want to create new programs that can't be sustained. So you're trying to balance it. So after discussion with the Juvenile Services Board or Community Juvenile Services Board, the proposal and the approval was for sending 10 individuals to a national conference on juvenile justice. So 3 people from the Wyoming Department of Family Services Rock Springs office would go, 2 from, from Southwest Counseling, 2 from Juvenile Probation, and 3 from the County Attorney's Office. Next, the board recommended spending money on doing a comprehensive community juvenile assessment to see what is going on with juveniles in our community. And then $32,877 was set aside to be determined. So there is a required in-kind match, and I'm happy to say it will not cost you additional funding. It's all in kind through Karen's office and my office. And it's being ratified because our chairman had to sign it outside of a regular meeting due to the beginning of the term. And with that, I'm happy to answer some questions, or Karen as the chairman is here too.
Questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I think the board should hear that the service board did meet and did talk about, like you said, some programs. The juvenile detention position that we had that was on soft money and eliminated.
Pre-court diversion.
Pre-court diversion, thank you. There was a conversation about that, and like you said, that soft money, just, we don't know how long it was going to last. So I do want fellow commissioners to know that that did not go by the wayside without having a conversation amongst the board. They understand the importance of it, but they also understand that it's not a great thing to have to take jobs away. Thank you.
Other comments? What's your pleasure then, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to ratify the 2023-2024 Community Juvenile Services Board grant contract. And the chairman has already signed, so.
Nearly a month ago. So thank you. There we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Thank you. On to tab L, request approval to ratify Amendment 1 to the 2022 HAVA Election Security Grant Contract.
Okay.
Thank you, Karen.
Mr. Chairman, commissioners, new acronym for you, HAVA. Sounds like a coffee, but it's not. So just a month ago, you approved an election security grant under the Help America Vote Act. The purpose of the funding is to improve the administration of elections, including enhancements to election technology and security. So the original term ended on June 30th, 2022. Due to the project not being completed by that date, Amendment 1 was needed to extend the term until December 31st, 2022. So to refresh your memory, the funding will be used to purchase a security camera, a lock for the equipment room, polling location storage cameras and supplies. The total award was $3,988.41. As before, it was signed outside of a regular meeting, so that's why it's being ratified. As a note, the contact at the Secretary of State's office is our former Mel Nomas's daughter. Small world. And Cindy is there if you have any questions for her as well.
Thank you. Any questions regarding the extension of this grant? Very good. Then what's your pleasure, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Lloyd.
I would move to ratify Amendment 1 to the 2022 HAVA election security grant contract.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Very good. Away we go.
Okay.
On to tab M.
Final item, and I do not see anyone online except for myself.
How do you do that? That's
It's a
amazing.
miracle. I'm all over. So this last item is approval of the 2022-2024 Community Prevention Grant Agreement documents. Sweetwater County was awarded $478,286 in this funding from the Wyoming Department of Health. There is no required cash match, and it will be passed through to Southwest Counseling Service under the attached subrecipient agreement who will carry out the activities. So we discussed this about a month ago, but this grant carries out data-driven and evidence-based substance abuse and suicide prevention plans through a collaborative effort with the local prevention coalition. And I believe several of you are on that mailing list, and I would recommend participating. So that's to address our substance abuse, mental health in our community, which unfortunately in the state of Wyoming is one of the worst. Southwest Counseling had to submit a strategic plan for this grant, and it addresses Wyoming's top 5 public health prevention priorities. Those priorities are underage alcohol and youth marijuana use, adult overconsumption of alcohol, tobacco use, opioids, and other drugs, as well as suicide community prevention service implementation strategies. So as a note, Southwest Counseling was ineligible to apply directly for the grant. And I've mentioned before, lots of federal sources in this, so it's pretty complex to manage. And Mr. Chairman, if you approve this, it has to be signed in blue ink. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have blue. That's good.
Excellent.
And
Thank
I
you,
will
Sally.
note, I have not signed it yet. So,
Yes.
like the others. Questions? And what's your pleasure, commissioners?
Chairman,
Commissioner Wendling.
I'll make a motion to move and approve and authorize chairman to sign the 2022 to 2024 Community Prevention Grant Agreement documents.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No.
How much was that?
$478,286. My apologies.
No, it was there.
Yeah.
I just.
All good.
It was on the
Catch
page.
it. Yeah.
Very good. On to tab. And then thank
All
you,
right.
Christina.
Thank you,
you.
Christina. Good job.
We'll see you online, I guess. Tab in, ratify CLG comments on RMP's updated 2021 IRP. Commissioner Tolman.
It's in your packet. The coalition drafted comments on Rocky Mountain Power's 2021 Integrated Resource Plan. As you'll see, some of the comments were regarding items that were not covered in the IRP of 2021. So I would make a motion to ratify those comments.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Thank you. On to tab O, Solid Waste Disposal District Number 2 Board Appointment. And do we have a point of contact for Solid Waste Disposal Number 2?
Roy.
Well, we don't
The
we don't
solid
have
waste.
contacts with them. They're not part of the liaison in the past or anything. So.
Then we have Gary Waldner is eligible for reappointment. His term is expiring, and then Sheldon Beard and Thomas McMullen as well. We have applications from. Comments or discussion about those for appointment.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Lloyd.
if I remember right from vetting this out the last time, neither Mr. Bearden nor Mr. McCollum lived in that area. So Mr. Waldner, I think would be, am I right, Sally? Do you remember? Am I right? Okay. Want to confirm my memory was right. So, so really, Mr. Waldner would be the only eligible person for that board with this, with the requirements.
Those are excellent comments. Then what is your pleasure, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Lloyd.
I would move that we appoint Gary Waldner to the Solid Waste Disposal District Number 2, a Bear Oil Wam Center.
Thank you. We have a motion. How about a second?
I would second that.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? I will say Mr. Waldner ran a great campaign. Good job. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. There we go. Very good. We have executive session on our agenda as our next item on our agenda. We do-
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to point out that we made some great time
We picked up right there, didn't we?
getting her done.
We are a mere 10 minutes behind. Would we like a break before executive session?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Okay. 15 or 10? 15 it is. Well, let's go 14. 10 after 12. 10 minutes after 12, we will return for executive session. And then after that, we'll have legal and personnel in executive session, and then we will be back in public meeting for good of the order and any action we need from executive. Thank you. See you in 13 minutes. Sorry, I talked for a minute.
We need a motion to adjourn. Did we motion to adjourn?
See what I do?
Did we motion to adjourn?
Oh, no, we didn't. Yeah, no, sorry.
Motion to go into executive.
Let's-
So moved.
Thank you. A motion. And do we have a second for executive session?
Second that.
Thank you. A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Let's take a break before